Hey man,
There he is,
how's it going?
Anthony Chaffee. How you doing, man?
Yeah, good. Yeah, how are you?
Yeah, I'm really good.
Good.
Thanks for joining me, mate. I really appreciate it. Hey, it
Yeah,
was
no
great to hear
worries.
back from you.
Yeah, not a problem at all, man. Sorry, I missed your email earlier. I just didn't see it. I get so many freaking messages, like I can't I just can't go. I can't sort of stay on top of them as they come in, unfortunately. So I just sort of hit them in batches,
So
and yeah,
I
just
totally understand, mate. It's also there's a time delay too. We've just sort of clicked over daylight saving, and
yeah.
I know, like New South Wales, WA. There's a um, what do you call it? Public holiday here today as well.
Mm,
And so I'm sitting there like earlier today. I'm thinking, fuck, it's a public holiday, man. This guy's
mm,
probably just like sitting on the beach somewhere. And then I thought, oh, maybe WA doesn't have the
mm.
public holiday that we do. I don't know. It's just like
Yeah,
so confusing. Hey,
I think it is a public holiday, but I don't even know what those things are anymore.
that's
Yeah.
it's just about how it goes sometimes, huh?
Yeah. But yeah, no, it's all good.
Well, it's good to see you, man.
Yeah, me
I
too.
wanted to congratulate you since the last time we spoke. I think was I don't know, maybe close to a year ago. It could be a
Mm.
little bit less, could be a little bit more. I'm not sure, but you really comes in
Oh,
leaps
yeah.
and bounds. I mean, like your
Oh, thanks.
subscriptions on YouTube and stuff like that are blowing up. I've seen you do a bunch of talks around and things like that. So it's really good to see. It's really good to see that community that when I first interviewed yourself and
Mm.
I interviewed Dr. Sean Baker and things like that was kind of my little introduction to the carnivore way. And I think the last time I spoke to you, like in another lifetime, I was a bodybuilder and competed on
Mm.
physique shows and stuff like that. So when we just
Nice.
mentioned protein only, none of us really said we're on the carnivore diet. We were just
Mm.
strictly we called it zero carb. That's what we called it, because we were
Mm.
just like we're not eating carbs because we need to strip off as much fat as possible. So
Mhm.
anyway, it's a new thing ish, in terms of the last sort of maybe year and a half or so. But I got to tell you, I'm leaning towards some of the benefits that you speak about. So there's a
Yeah.
couple of the things that experiences that I want to share with you, which I find sort of profound, I guess, because when I was, in my 20s competing, if I had gone, a week or two with protein only and supplementing with protein powders and bits and pieces, like I said to you, all it meant was that we were zero carbs. And because you were coming off
Mhm.
the carbohydrate load that you normally were, you sort of experienced the effects of not having carbohydrates. So it was kind of feeling lethargic and tired, and you would feel that sort of that sort of sugar high and then the sugar low. Your glycemic index would sort of go down. You'd feel like you're in this sort of like funk for a little while while your body's trying to get sort of more fat adapted.
Mhm.
But I did last year. Uh, Maybe was it last year, earlier this year? I did a 3 or 4 day fast. And then following that fast, I thought to myself, I might just try 1 to 2 meals of just steak for the next
Mhm.
week. And I've had lower back pain. I'm not sure if you've ever been to New South Wales. Have you ever been to Jamberoo Action Park in New
Oh,
South Wales since you've been in
no.
Australia?
No, I've been to New South Wales, but I haven't been
Oh,
there yet.
okay.
Yeah.
So Jamberoo Action Park is a water theme park on the south coast, and
Nice.
they have this rock that you can jump off. So there's a high level, which is I don't know, might be sort of 4 meters or so, and then there's a low level which might be 2 or 3 meters. So as a teenager, we were there for school. I dove off the top of the big rock where you're supposed to just jump off. So
Mm.
I dove in, and as I dove in, my body couldn't handle the force of hitting the water. So as I
Oh,
hit the water, my kind of back just went like this and just smashed my lower spine.
jeez.
So I had like a bunch of rehab stuff, and I sort of bruised my spine and all this kind of stuff. Just like anyway, long story short, I've had lower back pain since I was 13. So, and that's one of the catalysts of getting in the gym and sort of like lifting weights, and my back pain would subside the stronger that I got. But it's always been niggling. And as you get older, like into my 40s, the back pain's kind of like always prevalent. But I
Mhm.
did this 3 or 4 day fast. Then I did 2 meals of steak per day for a week. And after a week, for the first time in my life, zero back pain.
Nice. That's awesome, man.
I
It's
thought that
crazy,
was
isn't it, though? It's wild.
Yeah, man. It's
Yeah,
like it is really wild to think that all the good mornings and all the stretches and
mm,
all the things that I was trying to do to loosen up my hips and all that kind of
mhm.
stuff was, yeah, it may have helped to some degree, but it didn't help as quickly as what just a week of meat
Yeah.
would.
Yeah. And especially with something, I mean, you had this like serious precondition, like you injured yourself, legitimately, and then you're doing a lot of weightlifting, bodybuilding, those sorts of things, which is strengthening the joint, so that can help, but you're also putting a lot of weight through the spine, so a lot of axial loading, which can make it worse. And so, you can have very bad back pain as a result of that, and then all of a sudden you just change your diet, and look at that, it's gone. you
Yeah.
know that doesn't make the injury go away. It doesn't mean that it's just healed those joints completely, but it's removed the inflammation,
Mm.
and the expression of pain has gone down significantly. And who knows, it could, reducing that inflammation, reducing that sort of that process, it could potentially start to heal those joints as well.
Yeah, which is exciting. I wanted to get your thoughts on, or your opinion on things, because I guess some people might be listening to this and hear that story, and then they
Mhm.
might think, oh, well, this guy's just like full carnivore. But the thing is, I'm not. Like, I went back to reintroducing foods, and it's mostly fruit. So I kind of like am half on the bandwagon of eliminating carbohydrates in terms of complex carbs and obviously reducing sugars. Although I don't mind a splurge here and there in terms of having some dessert or having a cheat meal or anything like that. But I guess part of the mindset shift that I am struggling with is making the leap to going full time. It's such a resistance, and it's purely just a mind thing. Like I don't know how else to put it, because when I did the week of eating a couple of steaks a day, I didn't really find it difficult. I didn't get like massive heartburn. I didn't get, I don't know, some people have mentioned you get heaps bad diarrhea after just going meat only. I never had any of that. My body kind of responded really well. I lost body fat. I started to look, a lot leaner. Obviously my back pain went, so there was a lot of benefits. I don't know if I just found it maybe a little bit challenging on the fact that I was taking stuff away from myself, or deciding that I was going to eliminate all these great foods, right? Or maybe I would get potentially bored with it. So you must come across this a bunch with the people that
Yeah.
you talk to and help, right?
I mean, I think the main thing is just being open-minded enough to actually try something new. I think that's really good. Also understanding that meat's not bad for you. It doesn't cause disease. It doesn't cause illness. It doesn't cause diabetes. It won't cause cancer. It's not going to cause heart disease. And just understanding that this is an exceptionally good nutrient source. Is really our best nutrient source. And so just being aware of that, and not being shy of meat, not being shy of the fat on meat, is really important. And then be understanding that these other things can cause harm, that plants do have defense chemicals. That's a botanical fact. Anybody who's ever studied botany to any degree knows that, and anyone else can look it up. It's pretty straightforward. It's like, well, but there's this survey study, and they asked a bunch of nurses what they ate, and what they decided was that eating more plants is better for you. I'm like,
Mm.
whoop de do. Like, I mean, it's like that's a terrible study. These are terrible study designs, and they're rife with confounding factors and bias. But also the fact remains, meat is beneficial for us, and plants do have toxins. It's just a simple fact of life, and you can deny that all you want, but it's true, and it remains true. But the fact that you even just tried it for a certain period of time, and now you have that contrast, that's really important. Hey, a lot of people aren't doing that. They're not willing to make that commitment, that's take that step, and just even do 30 days and just see. But you did, and now and now you have that contrast, and you can see what life was like before and after you did that. And you can see, like, well, actually it made a big difference. There's a lot of improvements in a lot of ways, and I like that. And now you always have that in the back of your head. And so now if life starts getting a bit too troublesome, your back starts hurting more and more, start putting on a bit of weight, other sort of things start happening, you always know that you have that frame of reference, go like, well, I do know the trick. I do know how to get rid of this, and I can do that anytime. It's very empowering. You know, a lot of times people's lives just get away from them. They're in pain all the time. They're putting on weight. They're trying to exercise. They're trying to stay on top of things, but they can't. And they're just sort of getting fatter and sicker and in more pain. They're just trying to cope with it. And
Mm.
they're going to their doctors. The doctors just, it's just getting older. This is what it is. And, they don't have any good answers for you. But now you know. Now you know what to do. You know the trick. I talk to friends all the time that have tried carnivore and just lost, a massive amount of weight, really improved their health. And then because they were living with, a bunch of other people, and it was very difficult to just keep meat in the house because everyone else was just eating, everything else. Um, they weren't able to stick with it, and then they were doing sort of competition at work. It was actually my neurosurgical department, and there was a number of the people that were like, okay, yeah, going to see who can lose the most weight in this period of time. And I just said to my buddy, I was like, well, you know the trick. You know how to win. Do you want
Hmm.
to? And he's like, yeah, actually, no, I do, because he lost 20 kilos in 1 month,
Wow.
when he went carnivore, right? So it's just like, the trick. You can just take this whole thing down and win it. And he's like, yeah, actually, you're right. I could. And so, having that frame of reference, is really good. Um, Eliminating down to just nothing but steak and water or beef and water is really good too. And then you can add things back in. If you add in some fruit and you feel good on that, and you feel that that benefits you in some way, even if it's just for your taste experience, then that's fine. I let things like that slip back in, I don't feel as good.
Mm.
And so, even if it's just small, it's not huge, but it's like this, there are differences that I can tell, and I don't feel my best. And so I don't like that. Objectively, there are toxins even in fruit. Most fruit will kill you. You can't eat random berries in the forest or just random
Yeah,
bulbs on
that's
a
right.
tree, right? You just like wouldn't do that. A lot of berries that we don't recognize are very, very poisonous, and that's because they've co-evolved with birds typically,
Mm.
and because they want the bird to move the seed. Bird's a great vehicle to move seeds to a different location. And oftentimes those seeds will only germinate if they go through digestive tract of certain birds. So things like the cassowary bird in Australia, in the tropical areas of Australia, they're frugivores. They only eat fruit. There's about 150 different varieties of fruit that they eat, these tropical fruits, and every single one will kill you. Every single one of those fruits will kill every single animal except the cassowary bird, because those seeds will only germinate if they go through the digestive tract of a cassowary bird. So they have to be very, very toxic to anything else, because they have to go through a cassowary bird. They get eaten by something else, they're not going to germinate. They're not going to turn into a plant. That's how plants reproduce, and that's how they
Wow.
get the next generation. So it's very important. It's vital to their survival, um, to be toxic to everything except the cassowary bird, and to be very beneficial to a cassowary bird. Because if the cassowary birds don't eat that fruit, that doesn't turn into a plant. If the cassowary bird leaves the area, those plants all die out. So it's actually really important. And so still, the majority of fruit will still kill us. And all plants, period, will have toxins. They'll have more toxins when they're green. And if you pick them green, they don't actually detoxify or lower their toxic load more if they ripen in the box. It's not the act of ripening that reduces the toxic load. It's actually the plant actually pulls out those toxins when the seeds are ready. Because before it's ripe, the seeds aren't ready, and the plant doesn't want anything eating that. Cassowary bird or no, it's just like nothing's allowed to eat this because the seed's not ready yet.
I see.
And so it's rock hard. It doesn't taste very good. Maybe it's not very sweet, if it's a sweet variety of fruit. And so, and that's for good reason. They don't want to be appetizing to animals trying to eat it because the seeds aren't ready. So studies have been done in tomatoes showing that if you pick tomatoes green and ripen them in the box, they don't actually lower their toxic load because they're stuck now. It's a closed system, right? They're just in there now, and they don't go anywhere. So, it's just understanding that. And, it's not to say that you're going to get killed by eating an apple unless you eat a bunch of the seeds. And there is a decent amount of cyanide in apple
Cyanide.
seeds. So when
Yeah.
people do like smoothies, and they'll put like whole apples in, they won't core them and take the seeds out. Always core them, take the seeds out if you're going to do that. um, then that chops up and expresses cyanide, because it's actually a crushing mechanism that releases the cyanide. Like if an animal's chewing on that seed, it will release two chemicals that combine and form hydrogen cyanide, which is toxic to all life on Earth.
Wow.
And so it's sort of like a kill switch. Like you're going to kill me, I'm going to take you with me, sort of thing.
Damn.
And you do that enough, and you'll get, serious harm from the cyanide. And long before it ever kills you, you can actually get serious neurological issue and thyroid damage from low grade chronic exposure to cyanide. So, you know, to me, I still think that, there's objectively things in there that I don't want. All citrus have furanocoumarins, which make you photosensitive. They'll respond to light. UV light will make them bond and bind irreversibly to proteins and DNA and permanently damage them. If you're ingesting that, that will make you generally more susceptible to, photophobic. So you burn more easily. If
Mhm.
you get that on your skin, like people that have been squeezing limes in the sun, for instance. This is all over the medical literature. People can look it up. It's called phytophotodermatitis. It's a well-known phenomenon in dermatology. And when they're squeezing these limes and those juices and oils going down their arm, for instance, they can actually get chemical burns if they're out in the sun while they're doing it. In the house, fine. But outside where there's UV light, you can actually get chemical burns, and people have actually gotten second degree burns
Mm.
by doing that. And celery as well.
Yeah, I was just
I've
about to say, it wasn't the same thing with celery because there's a big thing
Yeah.
with like juicing celery and
Mhm.
just having what's that guy Williams? Is it Anthony Williams Wilson?
Is that
Uh,
the medical medium guy?
that's the guy. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. It's
Well,
like
I mean, when you get your medical advice from voices you hear in your head, you may, get some strange advice,
fair enough. That's a good point.
That's I mean, it is remarkable how well he's marketed himself, that he has been as successful as he has been, seeing is that he's relaying information from voices he hears inside of his head, right? So
Yeah, I
let's
know.
take let's think about that for a second,
When you put it that way, it does sound a bit wild, but I think with I hear a lot of what you're saying, but I think a couple of things I want to ask you when you're because you've been doing this for quite a while. The last time I spoke to you, you
Mhm.
said you did sort of like meat only for several years, and then you sort of gave it away, so to speak, and then just found that your body started to more or less deteriorate to a
Mhm.
degree where you had the brain fog, you had the pain back again, you had injuries and all the rest of it, and then you switched back up again. You started to revitalize your entire system. So do you think
Mhm.
that when you start to add fruits back to your diet and you feel sensitive to it, do you think that you're hypersensitive because of the fact that you've been on meat and water for such a long time? Because like I know when in the past when I've done fast, like extended fast, maybe 4 or 5 days, and then you
Mhm.
start to reintroduce foods, like you do have to kind of reintroduce pretty slowly. You can't just go out and eat a burger straight away.
Mhm.
Your body goes nuts. Like
Mhm.
you really are hypersensitive. But not only that, it's not just the foods. You're hypersensitive to taste. And like the first thing that has an amount of flavor to it, it's like there's a party in your mouth and everyone's invited. It's like it's
Mhm.
an amazing experience, right?
Mhm.
But you haven't had that experience for such a long time, so your mental, I guess, I don't know, attraction to food or the way that you've idealized food in a way, it breaks that tie, that bond between
Mhm.
needing or wanting food. Like if you fast for extended periods of time, from what I understand with you, you have like one meal a day, right? You kind of just one
Often.
ish,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
right. So do you think that that's why you're so sensitive to certain fruits and bits and pieces like that? Do you think your body just reacts because you haven't
Well,
had it for a long time?
yeah, well, I mean, to be fair, I haven't gone off and hauled off and just eaten an apple or anything like that. It's
Yeah,
just like, but when little things like mix in, like there's like a sauce, I can't scrape it all off. There's something in there. Or there's like a bit of rice and beans that has have mixed into chopped up beef that I've had at a Mexican restaurant in the US.
sure.
And it was difficult to sort of get all those pieces off because it was small pieces of meat and it's small pieces of rice and beans. So I'm like, oh, God damn it. So I had these
Yeah,
little bit of things stuck on there. But that one, especially, just little bits of rice and beans, like you, have had back pain since I was a kid, and playing a lot of high impact sports, and working out all the time. And my back just hurt all the time, except for those 5 years that I was doing carnivore, and I never. I think I had a inversion table, where you flip upside down and stretch, and that
yeah.
really did help. But it also coincided with when I was started a carnivore diet. And then all of a sudden I just didn't have back pain for like 7 years. I'm like,
Mm.
this is amazing. And then all of a sudden I was 27 playing rugby in San Diego, sort of off, eating up, including other things, but still heavily meat. And for a couple of years at that point, since going to England to play rugby, and all of a sudden I was like, oh, my back's kind of sore. I'm like, well, my back's usually sore. I'm like, wait a minute, my back hasn't been sore in years. Like, whoa, that's
Wow.
pretty crazy. But I also hadn't used the inversion table for a couple of years too, so I think it might have been a combination of both of those things. But now again, I don't have back pain, and I noticed that too when I was sort of just like even before I came back fully into carnivore. I was just in Bangladesh, and I was just doing refugee camp work there, and I just you have to sort of eat whatever the hell's available when you're in a in a middle of refugee camp in
Yeah.
Bangladesh. And so I wasn't on any particular diet, but when I came home, I just noticed that when I ate carbs, my back hurt. And so I just cut out carbs after a couple of days. My back didn't hurt nearly as badly. I was like, oh, okay. And so I just naturally phased those out. And then I came across when I came back to this and went, oh, hold on a second. All plants, got to get rid of all those things and then really go after the fatty meat. Um, and then reintroducing just a bit of rice and beans. My back was like someone was stabbing me in my lower spine for like 4 days.
Wow.
It was really bad. It was really debilitating. And so that was a big difference. So the thing is it's going to be a bit of a mix, because obviously you now know what good feels like,
Mm.
and you're just not really willing to settle for second best. You don't now you know what good feels like. Bad is just not cutting it anymore. It's just like, nope, nope, nope. I actually don't want to be racked in pain and have to take 10 minutes to get out of bed in the morning because my back hurts so bad I
Mm.
have to position myself in a way I can lever myself up to a sitting position and then
Yeah, that's it.
stand up.
That's where I see
But
you at, Anthony. Like
yeah.
you seem to have, and you know how Tony Robbins talks about you either gravitate towards pleasure or away from pain, and
Mm,
he often uses the
yeah.
analogy of you've got an exam due, and the pain of doing it and the pleasure of avoiding it is great at the beginning, but then it gets to a point where the pain of not doing it is so great that you need to just get it done, and then you feel good about yourself, right?
Yeah.
You seem to have that kind of association to just going back to feeling less than 100%. That
Mm,
that seems to be the major mindset shift that I see within you, is that you're like,
yeah.
I'm not fucking feeling any less than 100%.
Yeah.
And people should know, like, I'm curious to know your, like, what does your day look like? Because people, if they don't have any exposure to you, like, you're a neurosurgeon, you're
Well, neurosurgical registrar, so
you're
I haven't completed it yet though.
sure,
Um,
okay, but your daily activity is not telling people. It's a combination of telling people to eat meat only, and then
mhm.
also like working in hospitals and all that sort of stuff. Can you maybe give me a better idea of what like a day in the life of Anthony Chaffee is like?
Yeah, definitely. And just to finish up that last bit, it's a combination of you're not settling for feeling like garbage anymore, but also when you get rid of these toxins out of your body. I mean, when you're exposed to these constantly, you do build up a bit of a tolerance. You build a tolerance to any sort of toxin, just like you would alcohol. And so if you're drinking several times a week, it doesn't hit you as hard. You need more alcohol to get the same effect, right? You build up that tolerance. But then you
Sure.
stop drinking for 6 months, and then you come back and you try to drink the same amount, and you're floored,
Yeah.
right? So same idea with these other sort of toxins, and they are toxins. Let's not kid ourselves. They are designed to be toxic by the plant. They make these things purposefully to harm animals and insects trying to eat them. And so you have this toxic effect, you have this negative effect, but you build up tolerances towards that. And people. There's a guy, Mithridates of what was it, ancient Greek, so around the Roman times, and he actually exposed himself to all the different plant toxins of the day, like hemlock and this, that, and the other. Just little small doses. There's like that movie. What was it? The Princess Bride, where he had like iocane powder and he like poisoned both glasses. So had this thing. Well, whoever gets the poison glass or whatever, but they were both poisoned. He just built up a tolerance to it. So anybody he could just do that with anybody and they die, right?
Right.
Um, this guy did that as well. Mithridates or Mithridates, can't remember, but he built up this tolerance to like hemlock and things like that. Then he decided to piss off the Romans not a great idea,
Mhm.
and like took over one of their towns, sacked their towns, and they just came out and they just went from town to town, just destroying it, like 6 major cities, and they just destroyed all of them. And then came after him, and he was in the last one, and he's just like, well, this is going to be bad, they're just going to torture me, it's going to be horrible. And so he just started downing like hemlock, trying to kill himself, and he like couldn't die, he like couldn't kill himself, because
Wow.
he built up such a tolerance towards it.
What a
Wait
bad day.
6, yeah, wait 6 months or a year. Very, very ironic. Wait 6 months or a year though,
Mm.
right? And
Wow.
he would have been down. So it's the same thing with us, right? So if we get reintroduced to some of these things, I mean, I haven't had a vegetable in 7 years, right? Thank
Wow.
God. And so if something comes back in, it's just gonna I'm gonna feel it more. So I'll give you an example. Like I got these like meat sticks from a South African shop. It's called Drive Horse. It's like dried sausages, and they taste really good. I don't get them that often because they have a lot of spices in them, and some places will have more or less spices. So I got this one that had a bit more spices, and I was just like, all right, it tastes good, but they're more spicy. I like the taste of meat anyway. I think the spices sort of ruin that.
Mhm.
But now I normally don't get sore stiff after working out at all. And I had some of those meat sticks yesterday. Now I'm like lift my arm up, it's sort of like tight, in my lats. I'm like, what the hell is that? And my quads are sort of a bit, I mean, very
Yeah.
minimally, but I notice it because it's normally never there. So just those bit of spices, I notice a difference. And so, when you can see these subtle but real differences in your health, and you understand that these are from toxins in the plant, you just be like, yeah, I don't want that. And then you eat a lot of that, and you're just racked with pain and stiff and ache, and you work out, and you're just limping for 3 days. I don't want to go back to that. I spent half my life doing that, just being sore and crippled after the gym, and I worked out all the time. So I was always stiff and sore.
Yeah.
And I am very happy not being stiff and sore anymore, no matter how
I
much I
bet.
work out. So what my sort of day to day is though is I have a private practice in metabolic health sort of optimization. So I try to use diet and lifestyle interventions to try to optimize people's health, do deep dives into their blood work and history, and try to get out all the real issues that they have and address them at a root cause level, not just paper over them with symptom management. Um, if we have medical interventions and medications and supplements and things like that, it can help in certain situations. But a lot of the heavy lifting is done by diet and lifestyle, especially for chronic illnesses, chronic diseases, metabolic. I mean, metabolic, I mean, it's in the word. It has to do with your metabolism and the things that you're putting in your body. And so if you change what you're putting into your body, your metabolism will change. And so if you're having metabolic dysfunction, you need to first look at your diet and what you're eating, because that is going to directly affect your metabolism. We can take medications like metformin that will affect your metabolism, but that's a poor man's version of a ketogenic diet. It's just like you
Brilliant.
just stop eating certain things and your metabolism improves dramatically.
Mhm.
When I'm working in the hospital, I sort of more full time in my private practice at the moment, but for the last 4 years, I've been in neurosurgery as a neurosurgical registrar, and that can be very busy. You're up before dawn, you're in there, rounding on your patients at 5:36 in the morning. A little bit later if you're lucky, but quite often it's pretty early, and and then you have patients all day, and it's very, very busy. Multiple operating rooms going during the day. You've got multiple clinic rooms going where you're seeing massive amounts of patients, and you'll be assigned to different things, or you're just taking care of the wards or the on call is just a nightmare, because it's just there's just thousands of people that get very concerned. I mean, any neurosurgical issue, obviously people freak out and, oh my
Mm.
god, what's going on here. And so you get a lot of calls, a very, very busy service. And you're always working late, and you don't always get a chance to eat. You could be operating all day, you could be operating all night. If you're on call that night and there's a bunch of emergencies coming in, a bunch of very serious tumors, and people are at threat of dying because they have this very serious tumor, or you're on trauma call and you have a bunch of accidents and emergencies coming in, your spine, spinal cord issues, all these other sorts of very,
Yeah.
very
Wow.
serious issues. You could be operating all night, and you could be packed all day and operating all night, and then packed all the next day, because you don't just go home the next day. You have to just work the next day. And so this way of eating has been just an absolute lifesaver, because if I wasn't eating this way, I mean, I wouldn't be able to handle it. I remember my intern year, I was working 105 to 110 hours a week pretty regularly. And the worst week was like 122, 124 hours or something like that. I remember I worked 224 hours in a 2 week period at one point, and it was rough. And
Yeah.
I remember that distinctly, because I remember seeing that in regards to my paycheck, and it's slave labor because I got paid $850 for 224 hours of working
Wow.
overtime, overnight, weekends, all that sort of stuff. No overtime pay, no, time and a half or double time for working overnight and all this sort of stuff. And it was just right. I mean, I could barely pay my rent with that,
Damn.
and yeah, so that was pretty ridiculous. So that's always burned into my memory. But but now, that's a pretty common thing, working over 100 hours a week, because the on calls are so busy, and you'd be on call twice a week. So you'd be just 36 hours straight twice a week. And then you have your normal days, or maybe you're on for the weekend and you work 48 hours over the full weekend, finish Monday morning, but you don't finish Monday morning because you work Monday, right? And so you're done
Okay.
there. So, you work 60 hours, 62 hours over the weekend, Saturday through Monday night, and you may not sleep until Monday night. You may get an hour or two of sleep here and there, and it's pretty wild. So if I was not doing what I was doing now, like eating this way, I mean, when I was an intern, I mean, I was just barely hanging on by a thread. It was difficult. It was very difficult. And I was eating whatever. And in fact, that sort of drove me into eating more garbage, just more, carbs and sugary stuff, just to get some energy, because I
Yeah.
was just felt horrible. But then that made it worse, because I felt worse as a result of that, and I needed to go back to it like a drug, because it's a drug.
Mm.
And now, the longest I worked, um, here in neurosurgery, just neurosurgery, because then I do my podcast stuff at night. Sometimes doing interviews at like 1 o'clock in the morning. I did a live at like, from 1:30 to like 2, 3 in the morning at one time, and I'm just
Really?
haggard. I hadn't like slept in like 30 hours or 30
Wow.
plus hours, and and people were even saying, "Look at this carnivore diet, like Dr. Chaffee just aging dramatically." And whatever. It was like,
Looks like
you
shit.
try not sleeping for 2 days and like, be on call the whole time, and then just say, screw it, I'm just going to do a live, because I was waiting for a call. I had to sort of stay up, so I'm like, oh, screw it, I'm just gonna stay up and do a live.
Wow.
And when else am I going to do it? And
That's
and so I
nuts.
did, but I felt wretched. But it was, it's doable, it's manageable. I think the longest I ever did was, so I had 4 on calls that week. I had 2 during the week, and then the whole weekend, which ended up being like a 62-hour weekend. So that, and then 2 on calls the next week as well. That ended up being about 135 hours
God damn.
straight. And then that was just into the next week, right? It wasn't like I had a day off after that. It was just, so you're really working like you know, what would that be? You're really like working a
You're
500-hour
working,
month,
yeah, working two jobs and a part-time job.
Mm.
Two,
Yeah.
two full-time jobs and a part-timer.
Or
38 hour week would be a regular job, right? So
mhm.
you're talking like, yeah, you've got
It could
to
even be 3 full-time
maybe
jobs,
three full-time
sometimes.
jobs.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Yeah.
right.
And just right into the next one. And
Yeah,
people
never
were like, well,
ending
that
work.
there's only, 160 something hours during the
A
week.
week,
Oh, that's bullshit. I was like,
work
"Yeah, that's what
90%
I'm talking about. Yeah, it's
of
not fun,
classic.
because you're not going home a lot of the time. I mean, maybe you will,
So
but
what is it
it's often
about
very
the
busy.
diet that enables you to function at such a level without
Mhm.
getting tired? What makes that happen for you?
Oh, it's very simple. You're able to run off your fat. When you're eating carbohydrates, your insulin goes up, you lock off your fat store. So you can get fatter and fatter and fatter, because the energy that's coming in is getting stored into fat, and you're using some of it, but the rest of it's getting stored into fat. And then you can't actually run on your fat. When you're in a state of ketosis, you always have access to your fat. So you eat, and that fills up your gas tank, which is, you put some fat down, right? And that's your gas
Mm.
tank. And then you get to run on your gas tank. So I just have a bigger gas tank,
But you're
right?
not fat, but you're not
Yeah,
obviously not
yeah,
dipping into fat stores. You're dipping into
yeah.
the fat that you're consuming through the meat. Is that right? Like you would be on. I don't
Yeah.
know, 70 or 80 grams of fat per day, I would say, maybe more.
Oh, I'm sure more. I mean, I would eat like a kilo of fatty ribeye a day. But that's the thing
Really?
too, you don't have to eat every day because your body has plenty of available energy. I mean, you fasted before, it's like the first day is usually a bit like, ugh, don't really like that. But
Worse.
then the
Yeah, yeah,
longer you go, you sort of feel a bit better about it
yeah.
because your body's just running on its own fat. Um, and so, if I'm the real benefit of it is, I can work all day and then I'd be operating and it's like all of a sudden it's like, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night. And my body's going like, steak sounds pretty good right now. And I'm sort of like in the middle of an operation and I'm thinking, like, I've got 3 more operations tonight. And so I'm realistically not going to get out of here before rounds tomorrow. And then I'm probably not going to be finished until like, 7 or 8 tomorrow night. So I'm probably not going to eat for another 24 hours. And my body just goes, fine, no
Good.
problem. And I don't think about it after that. I'm perfectly fine. And I'm not 6% body fat, but when I'm working out, I usually get down to around 6% body fat, but probably around
Wow.
10% body fat, and I'm 105 kilos, right?
Oh, really?
So I've got a lot of fat energy available to me. That's actually a lot more than people think. 10% of 105 kilos. That's a significant amount. That's probably, well, I'll put it to you this way: a 65 kilo person, athlete, with only 6% body fat. That 6% body fat is over 35,000 kilocalories of energy, right?
Right.
So, if
Because
you
is that
estimate,
because fat has 9 calories per
it's much,
gram?
it's
Is that
very dense. Yeah,
I got
exactly.
it?
Yeah, it's very nutritionally dense or calorically dense, energy dense. And that's why we use it as our primary energy source, right? And when people think like, well, you need glycogen. You don't actually. You actually, when you're in ketosis, studies have shown with top athletes, top, world-class athletes, marathoners, ultra marathoners, Ironman athletes, things like that, showing that when you're in ketosis, and you're fully keto adapted, which can, take several months, that they're going through fat oxidization over 90% VO2 max.
Hmm.
Whereas before they said you could only burn fat up to about 60% VO2 max. And then after that, you're only burning carbs, which is why they said you can't be a top level elite athlete without eating carbs, because you only burn carbs after 60%. You have to be in that zone 2 fat burning level. Stupid. If you're in ketosis, you're always in a fat burning zone, right? And so because you're just always running on your fat. And so, at 105 kilos, 10% body fat, even at 6% body fat, I mean, I've got 50, 60,000 calories available to me. Like, I don't need to
Yeah,
eat,
right.
it's weeks. I've got weeks before I'm even starting to cut into my muscle tissue.
Damn. What about
So
the
you just,
argument that the brain needs a certain amount of glucose to
Mhm,
function? What about
mhm.
that?
Yeah, you make it. I mean,
How?
think about it. If you do, well, it's called gluconeogenesis. So your body just makes it through your liver. Your liver, transports energy via fat over to your liver. Your liver makes glucose, glycogen, and ketones. And
How?
so, if you're fasting, maybe try this, the next time you go ketogenic, or if you go on a fast, if you just don't eat for 5 days, check your blood sugar. It's going to be here the whole time. Where's that coming from? You're not even eating, meat. You're not eating anything. Okay, so where are those carbs coming from? They come from your body. Your body makes
Oh.
those all on its own, and so your blood sugar is here. I haven't had a carb that wasn't in milk. I think I have, like, every now and then I get some raw milk, like once a year or something like that, and just because it's not even legal in Australia, so like you don't always
Yeah,
come
that's
across it.
wild.
I was like in Switzerland, and they have amazing raw milk up there. Amazing dairy. There's all these alpine cows and things like that. It's all grass fed, everything.
Hmm.
And I had this opportunity to have this amazing, like, fresh raw milk. I'm like, I'm obviously going to try that. And it was amazing, right?
Hmm.
Those would be the only carbs I'd have in 7 years, right? Is the occasional glass of raw milk. And it's really like
That's wild.
once a year that I would have that, maybe less. And so, like, yeah, I probably have, yeah, well, it's not that often anyway. And, so I'm always in that state. And so I'm always, you know, making my own carbohydrates. I check my blood sugar. I don't check it because I don't care to, but every now and then I have. And I was at a conference, and they had like a Keto Mojo stand there, and so they said, "Okay, we'll check your blood sugar. We can check your glycogen, or sorry, we can check your ketones." And I don't worry about those sorts of things because I figure I'm putting in the inputs that my body needs, and my body's going to do what it's supposed to do. I don't need to worry. I don't worry about micromanaging my blood sugar or ketones. But it's just for fun. A few people were doing it, and I had, like my glucose was like 4.5 and my ketones were zero point 0.4, which is
Wow.
like when you're keto adapted, that's typically what you'll find is that
Mhm.
it's not that you're making less of them, you're making the same amount. It's just you're utilizing them very well. If you're going to ketosis early on, you have higher levels of ketones, and it takes 5, 6, 7 months before you become fully keto adapted. And then after that point, your ketone levels go down to around zero point 0.4 quite often. And so like the
Mhm.
Inuit will be around 0.3, zero point 0.4, because they're basically on a ketogenic diet their whole life. And people say, well, they're not even in ketosis. I don't know about that, because the thing is that we call it ketosis because we're looking at the ketone levels. You have ketones when you're at zero point 0.4 or zero point 0.3, but the actual distinguishing feature is that you're running on your fat. That's the metabolic state that you're in. So we call it ketosis, and we say, well, above this amount of ketones, and you're in ketosis.
Mhm.
But if you're not eating carbs or you're not eating anything and you're making blood sugar, glycogen, and ketones from your fat stores, you're in ketosis. That's what it is. The hallmark is that you're running on your fat. And so, yeah, there's plenty of fat available. But the carbs, yeah. So the other thing too about the brain, you make all the carbs that you need. You don't need that much. You only have about 4 grams of carbs throughout your entire bloodstream at any given time. So that's all the glucose that's required for all the physiological processes of your body and your brain. And now you use a bit, and you make more of it and put more out of it, but your body can perfectly meet the demand of your carbohydrate load for the day. Your brain, most cells in your body um, require insulin to get glucose in the cells. Your brain, most of your brain is no different. It requires insulin. Part of your brain, about 1/3 of your brain cells don't. They have a special receptor that they can actually pull in glucose without insulin. Um, and so those obviously are still required. But when when you switch to a ketogenic diet, the majority of your brain that does require insulin for glucose, and it would be a secondary sort of supply, energy supply. Those areas of the brain, including the neocortex, which is the thinking part of the brain, that optimally runs on ketones. So when you have ketones available, you have enough ketones available, and you have enough glucose available, those parts of your brain will only run on the ketones. And it's only when the ketone levels start to drop down that you start replacing and filling in the gaps with the glucose. And so that's a preference. Your brain prefers ketones. It runs better on ketones, and the ketones actually cross the blood-brain barrier and reconstitute into fatty acids, which then are used as the physical matrix of the brain. And so it's actually really important. In fact, this is why children in the uterus, like fetuses, like they are in ketosis because they have to be, because they need those ketones to grow and develop their nervous system and their brain. Same with breastfeeding infants. Even though there's lactose in breast milk, they're still in ketosis because they have to be in ketosis. It's much easier for them to be in ketosis because it's so important for them to be in ketosis. And then we overwhelm this by giving them these massively sugary formulas
Mm.
and baby food that tastes disgusting. And so we're putting a bunch of sugar in it, and you get these mashed peas with bunch of sugar in it,
Mhm.
and it actually forces them out of ketosis, and your brain suffers as a result. People don't realize this, but our brain size had this exponential growth after we became apex predators about 2 million years ago. There's this sort of steady rise for the last sort of 8 million years or so. And then up until about 2.5 million years ago, it was a steady sort of rise as we're eating sort of more and more meat and had to become smarter to, be better at making tools and getting food and getting meat. And then about 2.5 million years ago, when Homo habilis and the Ice Ages started, Homo habilis was forced to become an apex predator because all the other proto-humans, early humans died out. They couldn't survive. But the ones that were able to figure out how to become apex predators and really succeed as hunters, they're the ones who survived. And those are who we are descended from. We're descended from the winners, not the losers. And at that point, there was this inflection point. You had this exponential growth in brain size.
Wow.
And it goes up, 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 up until about 10, 15,000 years ago when it goes bang, straight down. It was just bang.
Hmm.
And our brain size, average brain size, adult male brain size, actually dropped by 11% immediately after the inception of the
Brilliant.
agricultural revolution,
Yeah.
and 17% reduction in the brain size of women. And that's persisted until today, but it didn't take hundreds of years or thousands of years. That was overnight in the fossil record. And there are a lot of other developmental issues: smaller jaw, crooked teeth, poor wound healing, shorter femurs, infectious disease, and tuberculosis eating out the spinal columns in these skeletons. And this was seen everywhere and every when people moved to agriculture. So we start seeing this around 10,000 years ago in
Hmm.
certain areas, but then other areas moved to agriculture at different times. And we saw that exact same transition in their height, health, and brain size. And we even saw that in recent times, in the last 150 years, with Native Americans and the Native Australians, when they were sort of moved off of their land, got rid of the bison and buffalo, sort of killed them off in order to wage war against the Native Americans. We cut off their food supply. That's military tactics 101. You cut off the supply lines to knock out the army. And so we did. We nearly hunted these things to extinction, and thankfully we didn't. But wipe these things out, and so we saw that transition in the height and health of the Native Americans in the Great Plains, like the Cheyenne, who there's a study in 2001 that looked at data in the late 1800s, found that the Cheyenne Indians in America were the tallest population of human beings alive on Earth, and were far taller than Europeans and European Americans. And at the time, and they were on average 5'10" for adult male. Like, adult male height in America now is 5'8". People don't think that that they realize that we're a lot shorter than we think we are on
Wow.
average. But they were 5'10". Interesting part about that is that was already after we had killed the bison and buffalo and displaced them off their land and put them on reservations. And so in that original data where they were measuring people's heights, right, they said very clearly that the older generations of people were far taller than the younger generations. And they estimated that if you only looked at the older generations and sort of did these measurements 100 years ago, you would have very different average. They would have been much, much taller on average as a population. So we saw that exact same difference. In pre and post agriculture, people dropped by like 5 inches on average, right? And then their brain size dropped. We saw the same thing with the Native Americans. We saw the same things with the Native Australian Aboriginals, and the health declined dramatically as well. You have anthropologists talk about this, where there's like these different sorts of illnesses and health issues that people have to contend with pre and post agriculture, sort of have these more sort of primitive pre-agricultural societies. They deal with injuries, accidents, trauma, and infectious disease. Those are in large part, what they have to contend with from a health point of view.
Hmm.
Whereas when they go to a post-agricultural, civilized sort of society, then they get the diseases of civilization. Well, what the hell is that? It's diabetes, it's heart disease, it's cancer, it's autoimmunity, arthritis, osteoporosis, these sorts of things that just don't exist in these populations. And people say, well, that's because they live longer now. No, they don't. We have very recent studies showing that hunter-gatherer populations around the world, when you factor out infant mortality, because they have a very high infant mortality rate because they don't have hospitals. When you have a kid who has dysentery and fulminant diarrhea, you can't take them in the hospital and put them on a drip. you know
Hmm.
so they die. They die of
Yeah.
dehydration. And so infant mortality is very high. And so if you have a high infant mortality rate, that's going to bring the average from birth down. But when you look at how old people get to when they die of old age, I mean, there was a study out of the University of Arizona a few years ago that looked at populations in primitive populations in South America, and they said that these people were absolutely living to their 70s, 80s, or 90s, or above, and in very good health, and they were getting none of these chronic diseases. So plenty of time to develop all these chronic diseases. And they say, well, the Maasai, who are carnivores, except they're pastoralists, so they herd animals and drink their milk and blood and things like that, and will hunt and do those sorts of things as well. But a large part is this milk and things like that.
Mm.
And they, who knows where they get these numbers from? I don't think they're official numbers, but their average life expectancy is only 60 years. Like, oh, look, they're dying so early. First of all, plenty of times they get diabetes and cancer and heart disease and autoimmunity and things like that. I mean, we're getting people in their 20s and 30s having heart attacks and strokes now. I mean, like, who are we kidding? So
Mm.
this is happening to younger and younger and younger decades of people. And so you have 60s, plenty of time. They have none of it, none of it. And again, that's average life expectancy from birth. And when you look at people and how long they live, they're living. I mean, there are many, many, many accounts you can read about where, and I know people who have been there, and you just doing their own research and talking to people and talking to elders and things like that. They have elders, so I mean that's a clue first of all. And they would often live to be 90 or 100 or above.
Mm.
And a lot of
Also,
times
you've got to
people.
consider their lifestyle. Like we live a very safe lifestyle.
Mhm.
You've got
Yeah.
automobiles and steel and metal that's protecting you. You don't have anything wild running around typically
Mhm.
hunting for you. Like it's just
Yeah.
we live a fairly padded life in terms of
Yeah.
our existence. So I guess when you add back those elements of the heat and the cold and just the fact that there was animals running around that could
The
eat you and
lions.
willingly,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that would definitely keep you on your toes. Maybe that's why they live so long. They were just like hyper alert and very
Well,
active.
yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, well, they did a study on that actually because these guys were like Olympic, class runners and things like that. And they, had like something like 40, 50-inch vertical leaps. I mean, they were just crazy athletic. And
Yeah.
they're like, these guys look like Olympic athletes. They're just so lean and strong and athletic. They must be working out all the time because that's the argument is this like, well, that's why animals stay lean because they're always exercising and things like that. First of all, that
Mhm.
doesn't explain animals in the zoo, which are completely sedentary,
Yeah.
right? And so, but they look. I've never seen a
All
fat
the same.
giraffe or a fat zebra.
Yeah, that's
They're
true.
being fed the right thing. So the
Mm.
Maasai, they did a study in the 80s where actually found that on average they only do 1.6 times as much physical exercise as the average sedentary American couch potato in the 1980s,
Mhm.
right? And this is when obesity started climbing up, and they were just talking about,
Right.
oh, this is just you're just low lazy, and everyone's just not exercising, all that sort of stuff, and not realizing that we actually were just as active, if not more active, than we were just a decade earlier, and yet all of a sudden the obesity is rising because we radically changed the way we ate.
Eat. That's
But the Maasai, yeah, they they're outside, they're doing something, they're living a much more natural, healthy life. Yes. Exercise, yes, they do get more exercise than us. It's probably a better quality of exercise, but it's not as all that much. It's not like that you can explain it all just by the exercise. 1.6 times as much as the average sedentary American, right? So in the
Mhm.
1980s, that's when the study was done.
Yeah, right.
But they're eating a very biologically appropriate and traditional diet, and yeah, and they're contending with dangers that we just don't have to deal with. I mean, they have lions, and the lions are trying to come after not only them but their herds, and so they're out there with sticks fighting off lions and they're winning, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, what is that about?
Put that into
And
perspective.
you know how they hunt too? Sometimes what they'll hunt is they'll just walk out and they'll just confidently walk up to a pride of lions who has made a kill, like a whole pride of lions.
Mm.
And they'll just be walking towards them and they'll just be confidently coming at them. And all of a sudden the lions are like, ooh, what's going on? Well, why aren't they scared of us? Why are they, ooh, what are they coming? Okay. Okay. And they'll bolt off. They see the Rebs have these very, bright red, clothes that they wear. And it says, like, if you just are wearing red and you're walking towards the lions will just get the hell out of there because they know
Wow.
that's danger, because that was one of the rites of passage for the men in the Maasai tribes was that killing a lion with a stick was,
True.
and so,
That's
that was,
confidence.
yeah. So,
What
they
you
go
call
out.
presence. Presence in a
Yeah.
room.
Yeah, exactly. So they're just confidently walking
Own
towards
the
them, and these
place.
lions are just like, oh, oh God, no. And they
Uh,
bolt off. They come in, they'll carve off like a leg or something like that, and just take
damn.
that away and let the lions finish off. They won't take the whole thing, because that could they may, oh, hold on a second, that's too much. But they'll take like a leg or they'll take something, and then
Wow.
they'll take that off and let the lions have the rest of it. But yeah, it's pretty pretty tough guys.
Yeah. Look, one
But
of the things that
that can go
stood out to me.
wrong. things
Yeah,
go wrong
well,
with
yeah,
lions, and
they
that will
fuck your
drop
day
your
up.
average life expectancy as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Mm.
One of the things that you said last time that stood out for me was that if I guess the nature of the way we're been told to eat over the last 40 years. Let's say like I'm 46, so I've always known the pyramid table. I've always known and the fats and the oils and the meats are at the bottom, and the carbohydrates and the breads and the cereals are at the top.
Mhm.
So that's all I've ever known. But you said like if that was true and correct and working towards optimal health, then we should have a really rapid decline in disease. But
Mhm.
we don't. We have the inverted
Yeah.
trajectory of heart disease and diabetes and Alzheimer's and just all of these degenerative diseases and things that are killing us quicker.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When you look at the consumption data in the U.S., the Bureau of Statistics, they keep track of all these different sorts of things, what people are buying. You don't know what's spoiling in their fridge or what they're actually eating, but you can tell what they bought, right? And so when you look at that, we have data going back decades and decades and decades. In fact, we actually have data going back into the early 1800s about how much of what we were eating. We're actually eating a lot of meat in the early 1800s, and there was none of this disease that we're seeing now. And then that spike in heart disease actually happened around the 1920s and 1930s, and that was at the time when we're eating like the least amount of meat in a 200-year period. So before that we're eating far more. It sort of dips down, then we started increasing the amount of meat that we ate after that. People could use trickery with statistics. There's three kinds of lies. There's lies, there's damn lies, and there's statistics. And so you could easily take that, a truncated version of that graph, and show, oh, look, when heart disease started spiking up, we were eating this much meat. And then we started eating more meat, and ooh, look at that, the heart disease started going up. It's like, yeah, well, look before that, because we were eating far more meat before that. No heart disease to speak of. In fact, the first death from a heart attack, diagnosed on autopsy in America was in 1912. There wasn't a single case report in American history before that. And it's not like
Really?
it's a subtle sign. They called it a heart attack for a reason, because it looked like this thing just ruptured open and got ripped open with a knife or something like that.
Mm.
Because that's what happens sometimes when you have a myocardial infarction. You block the vessel, kills off the muscle that supplied, and that muscle can die, can weak, and it can actually rupture. And then you can die from cardiac tamponade, where the heart can't be compressed with all this blood in the pericardial sac. And that's why they called it a heart attack. It looked like someone attacked the heart internally, and it just exploded. People are like, "What the hell are you talking about? That's insane that you'd even suggest that." 10 years later, people are like, "Ooh, this is weird. We haven't seen this before." And a few years after that, it's the number one killer in America, right? And so, but before that, nothing, right? And
Yeah.
we're eating far more meat. So, there isn't even an association. None. There's no association between animal fat or saturated fat or meat at all, whatsoever.
Mm.
If you actually look at the full complete data and data set. And so just going since the 1970s, according to the US Bureau of Statistics, we reduced red meat by over 33%, reduce saturated fat and cholesterol intake by about the same, increase fruits and vegetables by 30 and 40% respectively, increase grains dramatically. I don't know the exact statistic, but quite significantly. Increased sugar and fructose by as far as calories consumed on a daily basis
Yeah.
by over 3 times, right? Because you're eating less fat and meat, you need to make up for the calories elsewhere, and that was the surrogate. And then increased, over tripled the amount of calories we were getting in from unsaturated seed oils, vegetable oils, and things like that. Because I said those were
Yes.
unsaturated, it was the saturated fat that was harmful. So we have these unsaturated vegetable oils, even though we knew from randomized controlled trials with nearly 10,000 patients conducted between 1968 and 1973. It's called the Minnesota Coronary Experiment, when they replaced saturated animal fat or animal fat that had saturated fat with unsaturated vegetable oils and margarines, and lowered people's LDL cholesterol and total cholesterol, that more people died of heart attacks and strokes as a result. So we knew that that wasn't heart healthy, even though the American Heart Association says that it is. But now we know that Procter and Gamble paid them the equivalent of $20 million to say that vegetable oils were heart healthy and good for your heart, whereas
Holy shit.
animal fats were bad for you. They were paid to do that. There
Wow.
was zero evidence. There was zero evidence to support that. That was pure marketing. They just lied basically,
All
and they've done that before, or they've done that since as well. So. And that's well documented and recorded. That's not just a conspiracy theory or something like that. I mean that's been published
Yeah.
in top medical journals, that's been published in just the news. I mean, this is a fact. This happened. The sugar company's been paying off people to lie about cholesterol and say that it was harmful for decades. And and again, we have the data. We know what happened, right? So since all this happened, since we massively reduced meat and fat intake and massively increased plant foods and heart healthy so-called plant oils and grains and vegetables and fruit, what's happened? We become the fattest and sickest that human beings have ever been in human history,
Mm-hmm.
right? So that can't be it. You can't blame that on meat. You can't blame that on red meat. Now we replaced some of the red meat with like chicken and things like that. So our overall meat consumption stayed fairly steady, but red meat went way down, and we're blaming red meat on everything, right? And the fat consumption definitely came down because we went to chicken breast. We replaced steaks and beef roasts and lamb roasts with chicken breasts
Chicken
and things
breast.
like that, which I'm sure
Yeah.
you ate a lot of as a bodybuilder, just
Absolutely.
tons of
Yeah.
those things.
Yeah.
Uh,
Avoided the thighs because they were too
yeah,
fatty. Yeah,
that's
and
it.
just went for the lean breasts. So even
Yeah.
with the meat, it was one of the things where I remember um, Andreas Munzer. Have you ever heard of a bodybuilder called Andreas Munzer? He
Sounds
got
familiar, but I don't know if I have.
So around the kind of 90s to 2000s era, super shredded bodybuilder,
Mm,
and he used to have this diet where he would sort of vary his carbohydrate intake. He'd have medium, high, low days, but he was a big proponent of horse meat. So I remember as a teenager finding some dude around town that was selling horse meat, and so but you would eat it
nice.
because it was just the leanest meat, so you'd cut it into these little strips of like minute steaks, and you kind of just sear it very quickly and eat it bloody,
Mm,
because just like roux meat, if you cooked it too long it'd just go too tough.
mm,
But yeah, that was the thing of, even when you did eat meat, you were trying to go for the leanest cuts and you would trim off all the fat. There's no way as
yeah.
a bodybuilder trying to compete for a show that you would sit down to a ribeye and keep the fat on. You would take it
Mm,
all off and just eat the meat. You would have less sinew. Whereas, now we're kind of learning that they're important parts of the nutrient dense foods that you're getting. But more to the point, Anthony, of what you were saying, if you were to go back and look at the photos of your mum and dad in the 60s and
mm,
70s down at the beach, you'd find it hard to find a fat person in the photo,
yeah.
right? So they'd all have 30-inch waists and skinny jeans and bell bottoms, and they look trim. And there'd be one fatty amongst like out of
Mm,
10, maybe 20 even. So, but then when you go into the 80s, so like I was late 70s born, so when you go into the 80s, that's when people started to get porky. And in the 90s, it was the same. And you see the family photos, and everyone, like, you've got 5 out of 10 people are overweight. But then you've got, I remember the cereals were introduced. I'm not sure, like back as a kid, we had, well, still to these days, like you've got Nutrigrain. And I remember, what was that fucking Iron Man? What was his name? Was it Dean? Was it the Dean brothers, or what? What are they? I can't remember the Aussie brothers. The Mercer brothers,
Okay.
and they'd be on the back of the Nutrigrain box. So you
Mhm.
sit down for breakfast, you get a big bowl of Nutrigrain, you read the back, and they'd be teaching you how to body surf. And these were like pro athletes and Iron Men and stuff like that. And so you just sit down to this bunch of sugar and pile it down. So that was that. There was an ad in Australia. It was about butter and all that kind of stuff, and it was all about telling mum that she ought to be congratulated. That was the theme song of the commercial, right? She ought to be
Mhm.
congratulated, for
Mhm.
using the margarine. So everything that was introduced at that time, and you can just see the
Mhm.
trajectory of people getting fatter, sicker, and stupid, basically. So I mean,
Yeah.
and we're buying into this thing that even meat that's not meat that looks like meat is good for you, or better than meat that's actually meat. Make
Yeah.
that make sense. It doesn't make
Yeah.
sense at all.
Yeah, well, or the stuff that's just made, it's just chemical slop. They've just done this chemistry experiment to put all these different random chemicals together in a specific way, so it sort of has the similar texture to meat and has a similar-ish flavor to meat,
Yeah.
but it has none of the nutrition of meat. It's
It's
not
a
meat.
chemical shitstorm. The whole thing's just been
Yeah.
manufactured.
Yeah, well, it was actually funny. People had started doing these things the other way. They started saying that like they're like, yeah, I'm eating only meat, but I still want like a carrot. So I decided to make replacement carrots out of, but I'm going to make it out of meat because I don't eat carrots because they're disgusting. Like so they made this like ground beef sort of like carrot shaped and like put this little couple leaves in the top. And they're like, oh, okay, and I put some like coloring on it and things like that, cooked it up and like ate it. And the guy's like, "Oh my God. I mean, that's the best damn carrot I've ever had in my life. I mean, that's just amazing."
Yeah, that's
So,
hilarious.
yeah,
Hey,
that's funny.
can I ask you, when you think about the way the medical industry, the food industry, like you mentioned before, people getting paid off and studies. I love reading studies that are done by the manufacturer. It's like,
Mhm.
Coca-Cola. I listened to one of the podcasts that you said, and it was like Coca-Cola said that this study was, found that sucralose or whatever the shit they put in there was
Mhm.
still good for you and had no effect. And you're like, yeah, well, the fucking people in charge of the safe, you're leaving the
Yeah,
thief in charge of the safe. Like, why would you listen to a study like that? Anyway,
yeah,
my question
definitely.
is like, I don't know how conspiratorial you want to go, or whether you think that there must be a purpose to deluding people into or dissuading them to think that the thing that is actually really good for them is the worst thing, and the thing that's actually the worst thing is really good. We live in this inverted world now where I don't know how you went in the last 4 years, particularly with the jab and all that kind of stuff. You're over in WA,
Mhm.
so you guys got hammered with lockdowns and draconian
Mhm.
rules and all that kind of stuff. You work in hospitals. You must be just like, I mean, that is torturous to a large degree. You've got an indoctrination of people that are, you know, sticking something in your arm makes you healthy. Like their whole world is like upside down. But I find it just wild to think about the things that have been touted at the moment that are on a healthy alternative to a very basic, like, when I hear you talk about just trying the carnivore diet for 30 days, you're literally saying eat meat and drink water, like, and
Mhm.
add some salt for a bit of flavor. It's not fucking hard. I mean, you can write it
Mhm.
down on half a sheet of paper and all of a sudden you've got your diet plan. There's
Mhm.
no sitting down to scales. There's no, anyway, it's not complicated is what I'm trying to tell you. But
Mhm.
also what I'm trying to ask is this by design? Like, you can't help but think that
Mhm.
perhaps there's a grander plan to make people fatter, sicker, stupid, and feed you know a machine that's designed to keep you fatter, sicker, and stupider.
Well, I mean, there certainly could be. I mean, you can certainly explain everything we've seen just by just simple greed. They make a lot of money on these plant-based foods, and people eat more plant-based foods when they think that meat is bad, and so they start eating. They replace out the meat with plant-based foods, and these big companies know, and studies have shown that when people go plant-based, they may start out doing a cleaner version of this, but then a large portion of them will switch to more processed foods. They're going to vegan restaurants. They're going to, and those can be better or worse, but then they're just eating processed garbage because they think, well, it's potato chips, it's fine. There's no animal stuff in there. I mean, that's the point, is that meat is harmful, it's toxic, it causes disease. So as long as I'm not eating that, it's fine. And people think that. I mean, Oreo cookies are vegan, right? And so, and I know people who were vegan that thought that way. They said, like, well, as long as it's vegan, then it's good for me. As long as it's plants, they're good for me, because all plants are good for me, because we're just in the Garden of Eden. And I was like, well, no, we're not in the Garden of Eden. And so we can't pretend like we are. But that's a specific thing. There's a thing called the Garden of Eden diet that is promulgated by different people that and very, very wealthy and powerful organizations like the Seventh Day Adventist Church, who founded Kellogg Cereals and Sanitarium Foods, which is the largest cereal producer in Australia, and 20 other cereal companies. And they haven't paid taxes on these things. Kellogg's was made by Dr. Kellogg's, who was a Seventh-day Adventist, but it's not owned by the church. But the other 20 were founded and owned by them. I don't know how many they own now, but they still own Sanitarium. They haven't paid taxes on them because it's just, it's just a, you know, church bake sale equivalent, you know what I mean? Except in, scale that up by the billions, right?
Yeah.
And, so now you have this religious ideology because they're religiously anti-meat. They think it's sinful. They think that it creates lust. And so lust is a sin, and therefore meat is a sin. And so they've been railing against this since the 1800s. And they were railing hard against it in the early 1900s. And then they became more and more powerful and more successful with their commercial enterprises and cereals. And they founded and invented the processed food industry, and they profited greatly by that. And so now you have this religious ideology that is being backed by a multi-trillion-dollar processed food industry that now wants to perpetuate that ideology because it makes them money as well. And so now you have this Garden of Eden diet, which is actually the name that is used, the dietary recommendations in what's called lifestyle medicine, which was founded by the Seventh-day Adventist Church at their they have tons of medical centers and hospitals and research groups and things like that, hundreds around the world. And they have their main private medical schools in Loma Linda, California. And you have to be a member of the Seventh-day Adventist Church to even apply. And when I was applying to medical school, I was looking around at different medical schools in California when I was living there, and Loma Linda was one of them. And I went on the application site to see more about it because I hadn't really heard of them before. And it just said, you're not allowed to even apply here unless you have a letter from your deacon saying you're a member in good standing of the Seventh-day Adventist Church. And I'm like, all right, well, that's not going to happen. So move on. And,
Yeah.
but that stuck with me, and a lot of very prominent people. Dr. Pritikin was sort of said to be the father of the plant-based diet, but I mean, I knew who Dr. Pritikin was when I was a kid, because my dad was really, really on that, because he just did not want to take any chances with his health or our health, and so he wanted to have perfect nutrition. Well, no fat was coming in that house, and that was a big thing that Pritikin said, was just no fat, no fat, no fat. We still ate meat. But what Pritikin says, you have to cut off every single scrap of fat. And really what you should do is you get ground beef, you get it as lean as possible, you boil the living hell out of it, you skim off all the fat, you press it in a towel, you boil it again, skim off the rest of the fat, press it in a towel, and then you eat that.
Disgusting.
There's just absolute waste of a good hamburger. But um that was what he was pushing, and he was a professor at at Loma Linda Medical Center, so he was almost certainly a Seventh-day Adventist. But either way, he was a reader of Ellen G. White, who wrote dozens of books on the evils of meat and all this sort of stuff. And he said he was a big fan of hers, and he was really inspired by her. So even if he wasn't a member of the church, then he was certainly inspired by their teachings. And other people like Dr. Stephen Gundry, who wrote the book Plant Paradox. I mean, I sort of consider him an honorary carnivore, even though he doesn't know it yet, because he talks about how plants are toxic and how they defend themselves in that manner, and which
Yeah.
is all true. I mean, anybody can look that up. Just check any book on botany, any textbook on botany from a college level course on botany will show you that they're very toxic, and they're meant to be by design. Gundry wrote this whole book called The Plant Paradox,
Mm.
talking about how plants are toxic. You can't eat them. It's not safe to eat them because they don't want you to eat them. They do defend themselves, but it's a paradox because you have to eat them because they're so good for you, and because you can't eat meat because meat's bad. Ooh, what do you do? It's
Yes.
a paradox. Well, the definition of a paradox are two things that are mutually exclusive that cannot coexist in reality. So basically, is no such thing as a paradox. If you think someone's a paradox, you just don't have all the pieces yet. So there are no paradoxes.
Hmm.
You got it right with the plants. Plants suck. Meat's actually good for you. You should eat the damn meat. And so he's just, that's why I consider him an honorary carnivore, because eventually that's going to set in with him, and he's he's going to have to just realize, like, Right. Meat's
Yeah.
not bad for you.
I think he was saying
Yeah.
something like stay away from the nightshades,
Mhm.
and
Oh
take
yeah.
out the seeds and all that kind of stuff. But then
Yep.
if you're going to eat beans, whatever, you just got to boil the shit out of them first,
Mhm.
and then that would kind of reduce the
Mhm.
what was it the lectins or something like
Lectins.
that?
Yeah.
Yeah, all that kind of
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah.
Yeah. Lectins are a whole class of chemical compound as a protein with carbohydrate
Hmm.
molecule portion. And there are lectins in meat, but they don't seem to cause any sort of issues. But the lectins in plants can absolutely cause harm.
Yeah.
And so he wrote a whole book on that, and I thought it was very well done. Talking about all these toxins and lectins that you have to really contend with. Through technology, we figured out how to lower the toxic load and to more safely consume plants and to increase the bioavailability of the nutrients. And cooking the living hell out of things is one way to denature lectins, but you don't necessarily get rid of all of them.
Mm.
But if you don't get at least do a major push against them, yeah, they can actually kill you. I mean, people, the WHO even has on their website that as little as 5 red kidney beans, which we would eat all the time, is or that people would eat all the time. Just 5 uncooked kidney beans have put people in the hospital,
Wow.
with lectin poisoning. And so, ricin is the most toxic substance known on Earth.
Mm.
And, 1 milligram per kilogram of body weight will kill any animal, will kill us and anything
Wow.
else. That's in castor beans. And we have castor oil, and what's left over is the ricin. This is barrier protection. It's the skin around the castor bean. That's a barrier protection. Some insects eating in and boring into that, it has to go through that shield first, and it's going to eat that rice and it's going to die. There's no known cure antidote
Oh,
for ricin.
wow.
So you get just a little bit of that on your finger, you will die, if you get
That's
enough of
crazy.
it. So it has to be refined and all that sort of stuff, but definitely don't go around eating castor beans. And you cook the living hell out of some of these things, and it will lower the toxic load, but it won't necessarily get rid of it
Rid of it.
entirely.
Yeah.
And then there are other things that don't cook out. I mean, oxalates don't cook out. I read Adele Davis, who was a nutritionist in the early 1900s, very famous. We had a number of her books when I was a kid. She was all about eating meat and fatty meat and liver and all these sorts of things. So it was very, very important. But she also said, if you're going to eat plants, you have to do it in a very specific way. And one thing she said about eating spinach was basically you just don't eat raw spinach because the oxalates, and we've known about oxalates and oxalate poisoning for
Yeah.
centuries, right? And so, she said, like, yeah, you can't just eat these. They're so high in oxalates, it's really harmful to you. So what you have to do is you have to poach them in milk, because the milk has calcium that will leach out and neutralize the oxalates, because oxalates will bind to the calcium. Then you get calcium oxalate crystals, and then you just swallow that, and it'll just pass through your system, right? And so you won't absorb the oxalates, which will actually go in and bind to your calcium in your bloodstream and strip out the calcium. They actually did studies in I believe in the 1950s, where they gave people a bunch of spinach, because there's actually a lot of calcium in spinach. You put it through a mass spectrometer, you'll see like all these minerals and things like that. Great.
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they're bioavailable. They're bound up. That's another way plants defend themselves, is by being bound up in ways that we can't access. We don't have enzymes to break down. And so they gave spinach to people and to see how much that would bring their calcium up. But in fact, their calcium went down because the calcium was not bioavailable. They didn't get anything from the calcium, and the oxalates in there actually got in and stripped out
Leaks it out.
the calcium out of their body. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I learned that my second year in as a doctor, when I was working in the emergency department on rotation there. I was there for like a year, and early on, it was just like someone came in with kidney stones. They're like, "Ooh, ask if they eat a lot of spinach because that has a lot of oxalates. They can get calcium
Mm.
oxalate stones." And it was just like, this is well known and described in scientific literature. And then we're just like, "Oh no, couldn't happen. There's nothing bad in plants." It's absolutely not the case. There's nothing
Yeah.
bad in plants.
But it's also like a cognitive dissonance as well. Like just as you were talking, I remember in another lifetime I was a real estate agent, and we had a property that come up for sale, and the lady that it was the deceased estate, and we found out that the lady had passed away because she was eating this red lettuce that she was growing
Ugh.
in the front garden, and she was well into her 70s or something like that, maybe even late 70s. but she passed away, and they said it was the toxic load that she had from these this red lettuce or something like that she was
Yeah, well,
growing. But like you would, at the time, you're just like, oh wow, that's bizarre. But you don't think that, okay, well, if that particular lettuce, whatever it was, has got toxins in it that is going to kill you, then maybe what other lettuces, have certain things in there. I don't know, like, or spinach or kale, or all of those things that are, all over our breakfasts and in the cafes and stuff like that. So
yeah,
I've got a couple of final questions for you, if you don't mind.
of course.
When you go into the area of fasting, one of the key things that is of benefit is the autophagy, the level of autophagy that you achieve, and it's said that after about 17 hours of fasting, your body starts to get into autophagy. The benefits, as I'm not telling you everything you know, but for the people that are listening who may not even know what autophagy is, it's like you've got these two phagens in the body. Your body starts to just clean dead cells, and I am big on living a full life, but a life that I have, like, if I'm in my 80s and 90s, and I want to have vitality at that level. Like, my goal is to get to 150, but I want like a hot 60-year-old body, right? I want to have a quality of life, not just live a long life. Make sense?
Hmm. Yeah.
So when you're on a carnivore diet, when you listen to Mindy Pelz and all of these people that are into fasting, they kind of talk about going in and out of autophagy, and breaking your fast can sort of break that, the benefits of autophagy. So on the carnivore diet, do you stay in a state of autophagy all the time, or do you go in
Mhm.
and out of it? I mean, what's your knowledge on that?
You may transiently go in and out, but predominantly you'll be in a state of autophagy. Autophagy, to in my view, is really just a normal housekeeping operation. Your body's just fixing, building, and repairing. Getting rid of these old, damaged, precancerous cells, swapping out different organelles inside the cell, which are like the organs of the cell.
Hmm.
And so, that's just normal housekeeping. That's just normal maintenance. Like on your car, you just need to swap out, the different filters and belts and things like that, because that's just what you got to do, right? Your body's doing this all the time anyway. We shouldn't need to, starve ourselves and like wait for like a famine before our body can just do some housekeeping. In fact, the reason that most people have to fast and starve themselves in order to bring about autophagy is because um, you would normally be going through autophagy all the time, except that high levels of insulin stop autophagy. And that's the important part about this metabolic health side of things is getting your insulin down to normal levels. You need insulin. It's a very important hormone. But because it's so important, you really need that in the right balance, because if you have too much, then it's affecting a lot of very serious pathways in a negative way. So insulin has hundreds of different effects in the body, probably hundreds more that we have no idea about. But when you have a normal level of insulin, then it's affecting all those pathways at that level. But then when you eat carbohydrates and it slams up, then you're affecting everything at this heightened level, and now it's dysfunctional. And things that it does is it blocks autophagy. So if you're in a state of ketosis, like on a ketogenic carnivore diet or just ketogenic diet in general, or you're fasting, all of these things will bring your insulin down to a normal fasting insulin level. Unless you're severely insulin resistant and metabolically unhealthy, then it can take months and months and months to get your insulin down to a normal level. Now, most people, a matter of 3-4 months will get you down pretty close to where you want to be. Other people have extremely high insulin levels. I had a patient, you should be like a 5 is a very good level for insulin, for instance.
Hmm.
This patient, his fasting insulin, so this is the lowest his insulin is ever going to be, because if he was eating carbs or any, the normal food that he would eat, it would slam up even more than that. And his fasting insulin was 72, right? And so, you want that at a 5, right? Or at least below 9 anyway. And so he went on a ketogenic carnivore diet. 2 months later, we checked his bloods again. It was already down to 32. So it was a
Damn.
massive, massive, massive reduction, but still had a ways to go, right? A lot of like diabetics who are very insulin resistant may be at like a 25 or 30 or something like that, and so he was down that like after a few months. He keeps going. At this point, because that was earlier in the year, so it's probably been another 6 months or so. Since then, he haven't gotten his more recent set of bloods, but I would imagine he's probably pretty normal at this point.
Mhm.
Once you get down to normal, you're going to go through autophagy, and you're going to constantly be in this state of autophagy. Some people say, well, no, you just have to like not eat, and your body's scavenging around for different cells and organelles to break down to, use as energy and things like that. But that doesn't really follow, because if just having low insulin will do it, right? So whether you're eating or not eating, as long as you're not eating carbohydrates, you'll go into autophagy. So that doesn't quite follow, but also it doesn't follow because when you're replacing these cells, or you're replacing out the organelles, so you could replace out the old damaged mitochondria, for instance, and that subset of autophagy is called mitophagy. So you're breaking down, eating the mitochondria, and saying, okay, well, they're breaking these parts down to then use somewhere else. No, they then make more mitochondria as a result, right? So
Um,
they're actually rebuilding, they're just breaking the old ones down because they're broken down and old and they need to be replaced. And then they make more of them. And in fact, it stimulates something called mitogenesis as well, which is making more mitochondria. And so they break down the old damaged mitochondria, and then they make more of them, right? And so just being in a ketogenic diet, after about 3-4 months, studies have shown that you'll have 4 times the number of mitochondria, and they're 4 times as effective because they're all new, shiny, fast ones instead of the old, junky, slow ones. And so they work better. And even for up to 2.5, maybe even 3 years, you're still getting improvements on your mitochondria and your cellular function as well, because it just it takes a long time to undo a lifetime of damage. But if you're always in
yeah.
ketosis, you're always turning these things over, and you're just running ship shape the entire time, which of course is going to improve your health and your longevity. I have no doubt in my mind.
Mm. Do you have any data for yourself or for your patients that indicate that Dave Asprey often talks about that he's, I don't know, 59 years old, but he's got a, uh, whatever the fuck he calls it, his body age is like 39
Yeah,
or something like that.
yeah,
Do you have
metabolic health or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, whatever it is, right? So do you have any anecdotal evidence or
Mhm.
case studies that maybe depict a version of themselves, which is to say this person was, I don't know, diabetic, um, maybe predisposed to maybe cancer or to some sort of degenerative disease or something like that, and is now kind of through the process of the carnivore diet has had those cell volumization and had everything sort of renewed and it's maybe increased their lifespan or anything like that.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, you can look at this a lot of different ways. I mean, you have to always sort of wonder when they say, "Well, my biological age is 25 or whatever it is, or
Mm.
older or younger or whatever that I am," than your chronological age. I mean, how are you really figuring that out? I
I
mean,
don't know, but it
that's
sounds
the
good.
thing. There's going to be different ways. I mean, some of these things you can. I mean, I've gone to some of these testing centers, and they said that I had like a biological age of like 25.
Mm.
And I always sort of wonder, like, well, how do you know that? Because you could look at it different ways. You can look at your blood test. You can look at your metabolic health. You can look at your insulin level, fasting glucose level. You can look at your leptin. You can look at your hormones. You can do your testosterone, thyroid, estrogen, progesterone, things like that. Growth hormone, that's a pretty good indicator of aging. As your growth hormone in IGF-1 goes down, that helps when that's being use in your body. It's helping with building and repair of your tissue. And so as that comes down, you just age faster. And so a 25-year-old will typically have a range of growth hormone that is X, right? And
Mm.
then as we sort of get into the 30s and 40s, that starts to creep down and creep down and creep down, and we start aging more and more quickly. And so you could look at that. I mean, you can look at your hormones as well. You probably be a bit more accurate would be your telomeres. The length of your telomeres are these molecules on the end of your chromosomes,
Yeah,
and basically how long those are, that's how much time you have left. That's your
yeah, sure.
timeline, right? Which is a bit creepy, to think about, but there are things that affect that.
Mm.
So growth hormone will lengthen your telomeres. Exercise, well, like high intensity weightlifting and sprinting will raise your telomeres. They'll also raise your growth hormone, so there could be some sort of synergistic sort of play there. Um, and other things may shorten it and damage your telomeres. There was a study that came out recently, and this is why you have to be very careful with the literature. They said, oh, ketogenic diets, they age people faster because we did this study in mice and put them on a ketogenic diet, and and they had shorter telomeres at the end of it than the control group. And then you actually read it and they say like, yeah, they were in ketosis, because a lot of these things aren't in ketosis. They're just like, yeah, it's low carb diet. And it's just like the low carb diet was like 250 grams of carbs a day. And I'm like, that's what are you talking about? Like, who's eating more carbs than that? Like, what's wrong with your
Yeah, for
brain?
sure.
So, that's not a low carb diet. And so they looked at it and said, okay, well, yeah, they were definitely in ketosis. We checked their ketone levels, their blood ketone levels, and they were definitely in ketosis. And you're like, okay, so far so good. And the fat source we gave them was Crisco. I was like, mm.
Mm.
Okay, so hydrogenated vegetable oil, a bunch of trans fats. Yeah, gee, I wonder why they didn't have as good of a result as the control group.
Mm.
So I mean, it's just a fraud. I mean, that's not, if you're doing a ketogenic diet and the majority of your calories are coming from Crisco, like I'm going to tell you right now, you're not going to do as well as you would,
Yeah,
eating something else. Like that, you
poison.
don't want that stuff. Doesn't exist in nature. Why the hell are you putting it in your body? And there might be things that we create that didn't exist in nature that might be fine for you, but you know, it's a good rule of thumb that if it didn't exist in nature, we don't know what it's going to do, because we don't know what those chemical interactions are going to do, because we've never seen that. We don't have the biochemical processes to contend with these things, which is why trans fats are so bad, which are all plant fats, right? Those are hydrogenated vegetable oils that have a trans bond. So they have, this double bond, and they have this chain coming up, double bond, and then the chain coming down. That's a cis bond. That means they come up and come down on the same side of the bond. A trans bond means they come up here, bond, and then keep going up over there. Those don't exist in nature, and our bodies don't know what the hell is going on with those things. So
Wow.
they end up getting deposited in all these weird places that aren't supposed to be there, because we can't use them. So we have to stash them someplace.
Mhm.
We don't have the enzymatic machinery to like get rid of them. They just get stuck and built up in plaques and things like that.
Mm.
And so, that killed a lot of people, and that's why they're illegal in most countries now. But, if you cook with vegetable oils, then they make trans fats. And this is why you're like cooking in the same oil all the time. You're building up the amount of trans fats just from that heat process. And they want to save the oil. So they're like, put it through a filter and it's all gross and gunky, but oh, now it's all clear and
Yeah,
wonderful. Hey, look at
that's
that.
right.
Like, no, that wasn't the problem. The
Yeah.
problem is that now you've turned all these things into trans fats,
Damn, I didn't know
and
that.
those are toxic. So, you get those things, and so they had that ketogenic animal model, whatever, which is not necessarily translatable to humans in the first place, but also they're using freaking Crisco. Mice have never eaten Crisco either. I mean, what the hell are you doing? Like, use
Yeah,
use
yeah.
something real. And that, and what's translatable? So it's animal model, maybe it's not translatable to humans, but also, people doing ketogenic diet or a carnivore diet are not eating the majority of their calories from Crisco. Like, so this is
Right.
not applicable. And but anyway, that's one way of looking. So in my patients and in myself, I see hormonal levels and metabolic levels absolutely akin to what you would want to see in a healthy 25-year-old. And so there are studies done out of Germany mostly that have looked at healthy individuals, male and female, in their 20s, average age 25 for both. And the only criteria was normal BMI, no diagnosis of any sort of illness. And they looked at their blood work and their hormones, and it's wildly different than what we see in the rest of the population, or the averages, because the reference ranges that we use in most labs, or all labs really, unless it's like a private one that knows better, it's just the average. It's the average reference range. That reference range is just the average for the population that's come in. So every single lab that's owned by a different company in Sydney will have different reference ranges for the same test. Even
Mhm.
so, you get the same number and it's in or out, on different labs, even though it's the same number. So, it's a bit funny, and that they do that, but we treat those as optimal reference ranges, when in fact those aren't even advertised as optimal reference ranges. They're advertised as average reference ranges. So we really need to stop thinking about them as optimal. They're average. Okay,
Mhm.
so what's optimal? Well, if you look at 25-year-olds in Germany who don't have any health issues and a normal BMI, that gets you maybe closer to where you want to be, right? We want to be a healthy 25-year-old, right? Okay, so let's look at healthy 25-year-olds, where their bloods, where their hormones. It's wildly different. It's wildly different. So those are actually and then we look at different researchers that have like looked at just vitamin D, for instance. There's a couple in Germany, in Frankfurt, the University of Frankfurt, who it's a husband and wife, and they've been studying vitamin D in humans for 30 years, 40 years, right? So, they're saying, hey, this is what we found to be the optimal reference range. Great. That's what I'm going to use, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so when you look at that and you see people on a carnivore diet, especially if they're mindful and they're getting good quality meat, maybe add in a bit of organs every now and then, they absolutely improve dramatically. I mean, I had a 72-year-old man who tripled his testosterone level in like 4 or 5 months, and he now has the testosterone level of a healthy 25-year-old, not of an average 25-year-old. He's way better testosterone than most 25-year-olds. In fact, I had an 18-year-old who had a lower testosterone rate than he started with. The 72-year-old man started with, put
Fuck.
him on a carnivore diet, and 2 months later, he almost tripled his testosterone level, you know? And he wasn't even full on. I mean, he had like cheat days and things like that, but he mostly ate a lot of meat, but he, every now and then he'd have like, rice with his dinner or something like that. But he was eating a lot more meat and a lot less of the other stuff. And just that massively improved his testosterone level. So I see this all the time, absolutely. And
Mm.
so I see people's metabolic health improve. I see their hormonal health improve, and I absolutely see people's hormonal health revert back to that of a 25-year-old. I had a number of women actually in the same week that they were in their 40s, they're in mid to late 40s, and every single one of them reverted back to a growth hormone level that you would expect in an optimal 25-year-old woman. And most other people that I would see, it's a bit of a touchy testing IGF-1, which you have to do. You don't just test for growth hormone because there's sort of peaks and troughs all day long, sort of every hour. Men will secrete growth hormone a bit, and women every 90 minutes. And then if you do like a big workout, like a big leg day, you'll actually produce a lot of like the equivalent of like a couple of units of an injected growth
Mm.
hormone analog. So it's that's why exercise is so good. And again, it lengthens your telomeres, and so does growth hormone. It keeps you young, right?
Yeah.
And so I see a lot of people improving their growth hormone and improving their. I mean, I've seen women come out of menopause. I've have I think around 6 women now who in between the ages of 55 and 57 have come out of menopause and started making estrogen again without HRT, without any sort of supplements, and started getting their periods again, which they weren't very happy with. Actually, they were like,
Yeah.
I thought I was done with this, But I was telling them, I was like, look, this, like, think about it this way, like you were literally aging backwards,
Mm.
that's a good thing. That's a really good thing.
Yeah, it's nice.
And I always warn them, women in their 50s that have just gone through menopause, like you were on that bubble, you could actually get your period again. You could become fertile again. And so don't just get caught off guard with that, be careful.
Wow.
And, because I know, Dr. Ken Berry, when he started putting people on like a ketogenic diet, he actually had that. He had 3 women in their 50s that came out of menopause, but they didn't realize it. And they just were, having sex with their partners. And all of a sudden they came back and they were pregnant. And they were like, and they came back with, a positive pregnancy test, and going to me like, what the hell
Yes.
did you do to me?
Yeah, that's
And
right.
so I've always warned my patients ahead of time, like, just be careful, this could happen.
Yeah.
And it doesn't always, but it has, and it can, and so, people's hormones improve dramatically. And, I mean, the reason that my friend, my partner in my practice, um, the reason that he went carnivore himself and started putting his patients on carnivore and asked me to work in this clinic in the first place, in this medical center in the first place, dealing with this, was because we talked about the carnivore diet and the benefits of it, and looked at science, and sent him a bunch of research and things like that. And he said, okay, look, all this makes sense. And, you look like you're really healthy. And I was in quite good shape at the time. I was still playing rugby and working out a lot. And so I was very lean and muscular, like 6% body fat, and,
Mm.
tan and all that sort of stuff. So it was good, but I was, 40 at the time.
Wow.
And he was like, well, I was like, well, you look great, but what's going on under the hood? you know,
Mm.
like, would you mind if we checked your bloods? I'm like, sure. You know, I mean, I'm sure it's all fine, you know, but let's check it out. So he did a very thorough deep dive into all the vitamins, minerals, hormones, all these other sorts of things, metabolic factors, everything, just everything.
Mhm.
And he gave me a call and just said, "Hey, you know, your bloods are back. You know, we should talk more about this carnivore diet over a steak sometime because your bloods came
Wow.
back and they were actually really good." And so I went in there and was talking to him about the blood results. And he said that if you took 100,000 people my age off the street, then my bloods would be number one without a shadow of a doubt. And so he's like, I want to know more about this carnivore diet. And then he started putting people on it and started getting the same results. I started seeing
Wow.
this happen
Well,
in more and more people. So yeah, I know you can literally age
that's
backwards. Your
crazy.
hormones can improve. Your metabolic issues can improve. You know, I
Mm.
guess it depends on just the what metric you're going by for biological age. But
Sure.
I would
And it
I would
also
recommend
depends on
that
what
you
else
should.
you're adding into it. Like you seem like the carnivore diet is the lifestyle that you have
Mhm.
chosen for your nutrition, but you also do a lot of other things which are,
Mhm.
not just some of the parts, you know what I mean? Like it all
Yeah.
adds together. And I think, if you want to, for example, yeah, you can do carnivore all you like, but if you're smoking and drinking and doing all these
Yeah.
stupid things, well, it's
Yeah.
probably not going to be successful, right? So
Yeah.
I can tell you from my personal experience that I don't think I've really scratched the surface of truly what you depict as a true carnivore lifestyle. But as I mentioned, I'm 46.
Mhm.
The weight that I'm lifting in the gym is comparative. I would say
Mhm.
nearly to the point of where I was in my 20s,
Nice.
in terms of the weight that I'm lifting. And when I'm in my 20s as a competitive bodybuilder, I'm talking like on the gear as well. So I'm
Right.
kind of
Yeah.
close to being on steroids as a 20-year-old in my 46-year-old body. So
Yeah. Awesome.
and my body fat's not at a very high level, but it's also not at the level that I particularly want it. Um, in terms of like stamina, I do mixed martial arts with my kids. So when I first started 18 months ago, I could barely get through sort of like, I don't know, three rounds maybe.
Mhm.
Nowadays, I mean, this is obviously conditioning, but also I've been doing more of this sort of meat and fruit, and then fasting, and then meat only, and then and also the vegetables are kind of like all bar gone. So that's been probably for the last several months in terms of getting
Mhm.
rid of vegetables. My stamina in the gym at MMA, like I could probably go 10 to 12 rounds and have stamina. It's stamina in like that carries through, for example, in like the bedroom. Like it's just, I don't know, it seems to be reflecting in more areas than just physical health. It's sort of like cognitive ability to focus, ability to last a long time. Like it's all of those sorts of things which I think are conducive to a lifestyle, and also a kind of picture of health that is really singing to me at the moment. So yeah, they're just my personal takeaways from. Oh, and the other thing too, I can stay in the sun. Years ago, I could go in
Oh,
the sun within 10 minutes, burnt,
yep.
right? But I can stay in the sun now, and I don't. I've avoided sunscreen for a number of years now. So now I
Mhm.
might put some coconut oil on or something to sort of
Mhm.
protect my skin in that. But we're talking coconut oil. I'm not talking like SPF 50 or some shit like that.
Mhm.
Um, but I can stay in the sun for sometimes a couple of hours. And
Yeah.
even if I do feel like, oh man, I got a bit of heat today, and I'm a bit red, I'm fine within the next
Mhm.
few days. Like I haven't peeled in such a long time. Like all of those things are very notable differences in my body's performance, the way it heals, the way it functions. If I might get a little niggle or a tear or an injury and stuff like that, and within a couple of days, it's kind of gone.
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah. That's the thing that is pretty startling. You're going in the sun. I mean, so many people are so sensitive to the sun, which doesn't make sense because we are terrestrial creatures. We're not troglodytes. We're not deep sea dwellers. They're just like the sun
Yeah,
evil.
that's
Oh
right.
no, not a bunch of vampires. Like we're actually supposed to be out in the sun, and we
Yeah.
have normal protections to the sun. we make vitamin D. Vitamin D is made on the surface of our skin in response to UVB light.
Hmm.
And so but that's made, and that's also a hormone, by the way. It's actually a very important hormone, but it's synthesized from cholesterol. Now, if you don't have enough cholesterol, or you're eating a lot of plant oils and things like that have plant sterols that mimic our own cholesterol and signal our liver to say, hey, we've got cholesterol coming in from our diet. We don't need to make as much. Now you don't have enough cholesterol. You don't have enough cholesterol for your testosterone, for your estrogen, for your progestogens, for your DHEA, for your pregnenolone, for all your cortisol, mineralocorticoids, and glucocorticoids. All of your hormones are synthesized from cortisol. And so if you don't have enough cholesterol, sorry, it's all synthesized from cholesterol. So if you don't have enough cholesterol, or you're bringing in these plant sterols that can mimic it and lower your cholesterol level, you don't get them, and you don't get the benefits of them. And that's a real easy way of improving your hormonal health, is just stop eating plant sterols, right? And so when you have enough cholesterol and you're not, wearing sunglasses and things like that, which tells your brain that you're in a cave and you don't need to protect yourself from the sun, so you don't produce as much melanin, you don't produce as much vitamin D. You can actually start making vitamin D. You start making melanin. You protect yourself. You make that vitamin D on the surface of your skin. They have studies going back to the 1920s. And it was like 1927. We had a study looking at where they scraped the sebum off the skin of people that had just been in the sun and gave that to rats that had rickets, which is a vitamin D deficiency. You get soft bones, osteomalacia, and it cured it. It cured their rickets, right? And so obviously there's vitamin D in the sebum of your skin, and it actually some studies have shown that it can actually stay on there for 48 hours before it's fully absorbed into your skin. And it makes sense, right? You go out in the sun,
Totally.
you're not supposed to be out in the sun in 2 minutes, right? We live outside, right? So the sun comes up, you're in the sun for the rest of the day, right?
Mm.
Maybe you're in the shade and this and the other, but you need to be protected from the sun the whole day. And so you're going to make vitamin D. It's going to stay on the surface of your skin. That's another thing that people don't realize, is that, oh, you just go in the sun for 15 minutes, you get all the vitamin D you need. No, you don't. My God, no, you don't. And also, it makes on the surface of your skin. It's only, you may not have enough cholesterol. You may not have enough, penetration from the UVB radiation, depending on your latitude. And you may not have the cholesterol, and you may not leave it on your skin long enough, because people then, take a shower and they wash all the sebum off. The vitamin D goes with it. And so that's
Mm.
a normal protection. And so obviously, if you have vitamin D and you're leaving it on your skin, you're going to have more protection from the sun.
That's
But
right.
also, you're getting rid of all those coumarins. You're not eating you're not just guzzling down 16 ounces of celery juice every morning,
Yes.
because some voice in your head told you to. And um, and you're not eating citrus and things like that, and getting those coumarins, which make you photosensitive.
Mm.
And so you're going to be much more protected from the sun, just naturally, basically, because you're not getting in your body's own way from dealing with the sun. You're also reducing inflammation massively, and so you don't get all of the different harms. So yeah, you may burn. But is that what's a burn? The redness.
Mm.
I guess I really wouldn't call that a burn. That's just the capillaries opening up to bring blood to that area of the body,
Yeah.
to your skin, because yeah, maybe there's a bit of sun damage, but your body repairs that and heals from that. But a burn is when it dies, it kills those areas, and you have to peel, right?
Yes.
And so you don't really get that unless you like really,
Yeah. I have
really
to
overdo it.
really get
Like you
close.
really have to get, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was up in Carragini and Exmouth for 2 weeks. I didn't have a shirt the whole time. I was out in the sun all day, every day,
Right.
and just had a great time. And I was like brick red at the end of it. And
Really.
people people were just like, I remember I was walking on the last day and I was like, all right, I'm going to stay here to the afternoon, and then I'm going to, drive home overnight, and,
Yeah.
get home in the morning. And this guy was like, he had this sort of look on his face, like sort of like scared, but sort of like smiling at the same time,
Yeah.
like,
God
your
damn.
back is really red. And I
Yeah.
was like, it's fine. And he's just like, no, I mean, it's really red. I was like, it'll be a tan tomorrow. Like it's fine. He's like, oh, I don't know. And I was just like, I looked at my arm, and it was just, brick red. And I just looked at it, I just went and just slapped it as hard as I could. And he just visibly shook. It was, oh God,
Really.
like that. Didn't
Yeah.
hurt. I could take
God
hot
damn.
showers. It's not a problem. It didn't
Wow.
peel. I got a bit of dry skin sort of flaking off on the bridge of my nose,
Mhm.
bit of flaky skin on the tips of my shoulders. That's it. At least I
That's
got
it.
the most of it, right? Everything else just turned into a deep tan.
Mm.
And there's even like the guys that are at my work. It was funny actually. There's a guy, he's a consultant neurosurgeon, and really nice guy. He's family from Sri Lanka, And so he's very dark, right? And then I started like going in the sun more, and I'm just getting like every time he sees me, I'm like darker and darker. He's like, Jesus, like what's
Mhm.
going on? And I got to the point where I was like, I was darker than you would expect a
Lincoln.
white guy to be, right? So, I mean, for instance, like I mean, I just yeah tan really easily, but when I'm not eating plants, it's even crazier. And when I was in Arizona, it's right on the Mexico border. So there's a lot of Mexican Americans and things like that down there, and Latin Americans,
Mhm.
and um, and so I was just out in the sun all day. It was just bloody hot. It was like 50 degrees every day, and I'm like playing rugby and this stuff. And so like as soon as I got home, like me and my best friend, we would just like jump in the pool, and we're just like, oh thank God,
Mhm.
just trying to cool off and chill out. So we were in the sun all the time because that was our air conditioning. We were just too young and broke and cheap to like to pay for the AC. So we just never turned
Yeah.
it on. So we just had to like
Either
acclimatize.
way.
And so we just lived in that pool. That's like how
Mhm.
we cooled off. And I got so crazy tan. Um, that people thought I was Mexican,
Mexican.
that yeah, because I was just so tan. And I figured that out probably around Christmas, and it's still like 30 degrees. It's sort of like here. It's like it's hot in the summer, but or in the winter, or sorry, in Christmas, but it's actually still summer or winter there.
Still warm. Mm.
And so at that point, I wasn't going in the sun nearly as much. I wasn't just there all day, every day, just to try to cool off. And I'm more accustomed to the heat and everything. And so my tan started to fade. My really deep tan started to fade. And so now I was just really tan, but just not that dark. And I remember my apartment manager said to me, we were all friends, and she was like, it's like, oh, I realized something. I was like, yeah, what's that? It's like, you're just like a really tan white guy, aren't you? And I was just like, yeah, like, what do you think I was? And she was like, oh, I just thought you were something else. Anyway, I gotta go. And she's like,
That's-
you know, and
wow.
but yeah, but that's it. You just don't burn. Your body
Mm.
works normally, and we're supposed to be out in the sun. We're supposed to be out in nature. I mean, yeah, obviously you can overdo it. Don't do that.
Yeah.
You don't want to damage your skin, but it's a lot more difficult to damage your skin when you're actually eating properly and not bringing these
Mm.
toxins in your body, and making sure you have enough cholesterol to make vitamin D. It's
Yeah.
pretty simple.
So cool.
Yeah.
Um, when people are, if they're hung in for this long, they're probably thinking
Mhm.
they've never tried the carnivore diet. I mean, I did allude to before. It's very simple when you break it down into what you need to do. But I know you've got the 30-day challenge and you've got a few things like that. But
Mhm.
what would you suggest would be sort of the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points of just getting to the point of getting close to being on the carnivore diet and experiencing some of the things that we've chatted about?
Yeah, well, I think it's really good to just try for 30 days and just see for yourself. Meat's not going to cause harm. Animal fat does not cause disease. That has been thoroughly debunked 100 times. And, I have many videos on that. There are cardiologists and cardiothoracic surgeons and lipidologists and all the rest that teach this in university. And they say, look, this is complete, hokum. So, don't take my word for it. I have a video called "The Truth About Cholesterol and Heart Disease." And you look at this; it's all backed by the literature and the evidence. But look at other people that teach this at the university level. They'll tell you the same thing. And then other people pitch the old tired lies, but they are tired lies. I mean, if you want actual academic, you go to Dr. Eric Westman, who's a professor of medicine at Duke University, and that's one of the top hospitals and medical schools in the world. I did my sub internship there in plastics, reconstructive maxillofacial surgery. It is an excellent institution, and he's a professor of medicine there, and he talks about this. Is like that's the old way of thinking, and it's wrong. Fat and animal fat and saturated fat and cholesterol do not cause heart disease, and he tells you why. So you guys can go and check him out if you don't want to listen to me. Um, and so just try it for 30 days and see for yourself. Like you'll see a massive improvement in your health. Most people will see a significant improvement in their health during that time. Some take a little bit longer to get their energy levels up, and to get to get anyone to get the full benefits. It will take longer than that, but most people will see a lot of benefit even in those first 2 weeks. Or in those first few weeks. It takes about 2 weeks to get most of the little plant toxins out of your system, and then start feeling really, really good again.
Mhm.
And after that, you just start feeling better and better and better. You're losing weight steadily. Most people will. Your energy levels are much better, and you start looking at your life and realizing that you've probably felt pretty garbage for your entire life, and now you're starting to feel like you're supposed to, and you look at that contrast and you start to get pissed. Like I was pissed. I looked at back in my life and realized I felt like crap my entire
Mm.
life, except for that 5 year period that I inadvertently did a carnivore diet because my professors told me how toxic plants were and that he didn't eat any of these things because they were so poisonous and carcinogenic. I'm like, right, I'm never eating those damn things again. And for
Mhm.
5 years, that was enough to keep me the hell away from plants. And then all the propaganda and inundation of this plant-based movement, sort of wear on me. Like, oh, I'll eat a stupid salad, fine. But I still mostly ate meat. And so it's, so if you're, to go back to, what you should do, you should really just try this for 30 days. Um, Eating meat is really important, but a lot of people think that going on a carnivore diet is just you just eat a lot more meat and maybe some less of the other stuff. But that's not where you're going to get the full benefits from it. You're really going to get the most benefits if you really cut out everything else except fatty meat and water, because the meat is really important. That's where you get all your nutrients from. It's vital that you get that, and that's going to help you in a lot of ways. It's going to give you the nutrients that you need to get better and lift up your vitamins and minerals. That alone will make a huge difference. But the other things cause harm. And so it's really important to get rid of those. I find that, getting rid of the last 5-10% of plants and just going down to just pure meat and water gives about 95% of the benefits. And, so my hard rule for myself and something that I recommend people are trying for at least 30 days just to get your baseline to see how you feel and then add things back in to see what that does to you and see if that's worth bringing that back in for you.
Mhm.
I mean, I love every single steak that I've ever had, so that's not a problem for me. I don't get bored with that. I'm excited every time I eat a steak because I'm just like, yes, that's all I want anyway. And it tastes good when you want it. So if a steak is sort of sounding boring, you're really not hungry. I mean, that's the main thing. So just don't eat. That's fine. So it should always be exciting and wonderful and entertaining every time you eat it, but that's not what it's for. What it's for is for nutrition, and that's the important thing. So
Mm.
I find it's as important what not to eat as what to eat. So eating a lot of fatty meat until it stops tasting good, that's very important because meat will taste good when your body wants those nutrients and it'll taste slightly less good with each bite until finally it doesn't taste good anymore at all. And that's when your body's just telling you, hey, that's enough. That's how all animals in the wild, they have this internal switch that says, hey, we don't need to keep eating anymore. That's fine. Your body naturally will monitor your caloric intake and your nutrients and everything like that.
Mhm.
But then what not to eat because these other things cause harm. So my hard rule for myself is no plants or mushrooms, no sugar or any sweeteners, and nothing artificial. So that goes for sauces, seasonings, and drinks as well. So you can just sort of that's your litmus test. You think like, well, what about coffee? We're like, well, that's a plant, right? And it's a seed too. So seeds typically have the highest concentration of plant toxins because that's a plant's baby. They're trying to protect that more than anything. And so, well, what about honey? Well, well, that's from bees. And like, well, it's technically bee vomit, as you wouldn't eat cud from a cow, even though that's coming from a cow's stomach, because that's cow food, that's not human food. And it's just, and so the honey is just really concentrated nectar that's been then horked up by a bee so that they can have that for later. And but also it's sugar, right? And so, okay, we're not doing sugar, so you cut that out. And obviously, any weird chemical name that you've never heard of before, just
Mm.
just don't eat that.
Fine.
Even if it's an additive in meat. And so that's pretty much it. If people, I think it's really important to really immerse yourself into understanding why this is a good idea. Do you have a good why? Then you're much more likely to stick with something.
Mm.
Um, so going on YouTube, looking at different videos, and I have a whole playlist called "Getting Started on a Carnivore Diet," and that has a lot of videos on how to do a carnivore diet successfully, like carnivore for beginners, fiber constipation diet, frequently asked questions, things like that. But there's ones on why to do it, why it's important, why it makes a difference, and so going through those and really understanding um, the reasons behind it, and and checking the studies that we cite and seeing if you agree with them. You may not. Fine. It's
Mm.
your life. This is just something that we've done, that we've studied, and these are the conclusions that we've drawn, and they're based on certain things that we show you. And if you agree, then great. You try it yourself and you feel better. Perfect. And if you don't agree and you don't want to try it, it's your life.
Yeah.
But you will feel better, because it does work. I mean, that's the simple That's the simple fact of the matter is, I mean, we're seeing millions of people around the world doing this now, and they're massively improving their health. And I I've never seen any of my patients. I have hundreds of patients on a carnivore diet. I've worked with thousands of people over the years, and I have never seen a single person not succeed and thrive on a carnivore diet. There's some people that have different issues. It takes 8 months, 9 months, or longer to start losing any weight, but that's because their metabolism is shot and and their hormones are trying to
Yeah.
revitalize themselves. Takes time, and
Yes.
other times people have different sort of issues. Maybe they're not eating enough, maybe they're not eating enough fat, these sorts of things. When you work with someone, you can sort of elicit these things out. But every single one, I have yet to come across someone who we weren't able to figure out, what the issue was, and get them really thriving on
Mm.
this. And then it's up to them, whether they want to do that, because like you said, sometimes you just, you want to eat something that you shouldn't, but
Yeah.
I think that people need to be careful with that as well, because that's the same relationship that we have with drugs and alcohol. Smoking, I mean, we know it's not good for us. We know smoking's not good, but we enjoy the experience of it. We enjoy the experience of cigarettes. We enjoy the experience of alcohol. We enjoy the
Alcohol.
experience of drugs and narcotics,
Yeah.
but
Food
we
is.
understand that they're bad for us. So we really should probably stay the hell away from them. And then we have a tiramisu or some French fries or something else, and he's like, I know it's not really good for me, but it just tastes so good. It's just
Yeah.
like, all right, but that's that same relationship. And instead of getting, high for 6 hours and partying and having a great time, like you have a stomach ache and are on the couch with brain fog for 6 hours. It's like, was it really that worth it?
Mm.
A moment on the lips, forever on the hips, and
Yeah. Yeah.
brain dead on the
Wasteland.
couch. So it's like,
Yeah.
I don't know if it's all that worth it, but it's the same relationship. We have the same relationship. We're treating food like we do drugs.
Yeah.
We're accepting the bad because we want that short-term gratification.
Sure.
And in general, when you accept short-term gratification for long-term harm, like you're not doing well. There's those famous sort of games with kids where you offer them, a piece of candy or something like that, or a piece of gum, and you say, "Hey, you put this here, and you can have that now, and that's yours. Or if you wait 10 minutes, you can have two." And that's a really strong test, and it can actually it's a pretty strong indicator of how successful they're going to be
Yeah.
financially, economically later on, because you can forego short-term gratification for long-term reward and
Mm.
success. You're willing to wait patiently for a better outcome afterwards. And we're not doing that with our food. We're saying, no, no, I want that. I want to feel good right now. I don't care about the long term.
Yeah.
Or they're convinced themselves that it's not that bad. That's a big one. But cocaine addicts do that too. Oh, it's not that bad,
Oh, when
and
addiction starts, it's only $1.
that's
It's
it.
only one drink or whatever it is. It's only one shot, and all of a
Yeah.
sudden, yeah, you're
Yeah.
down at
Well,
eight.
and I'm sure in your world in bodybuilding, I mean, I knew guys in high school that were talking about steroids. One cycle's not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
Well, maybe, but people generally don't stop at
Yeah, that's it.
one, like they
Oh,
don't
look,
stop at
man,
one
it's just,
line.
I think if you've got that type of personality, it's
Mhm.
it's like, man, if I eat 1 gram of protein and get this big, well, then what if I eat 3 grams of protein? And
Yeah.
like you just want
Mm.
to have more of the thing, so like more is better. So
Yeah.
I think you can go down that path. I mean, even just from a very basic level, I find fruit is very delicious and tasty and all that kind of stuff. But it's actually a bit of a lure in a sense. Like it gives
Mhm.
you a false sense of safety
Yeah.
in this diet depiction. I guess it's like you go through a watermelon, you go, oh, it's sweet and it's beautiful, but once you get through a whole watermelon, you've got that addictive sort of sugar hit that you're trying to chase again. So it's almost like I didn't have an ice cream, which is arguably worse,
Mm.
but the same thing. I just uh, binged on watermelon, right? So you sort of have that addictive tendency as well. But anyway,
Yeah.
I think what I like about all of what you're saying is just try it. Like when people have
Yeah.
said to me in the past, I've done a vegan diet. 10 years ago, I did a vegan diet for a year. Fucking, I think I was in the worst shape of my life. Like I just just couldn't believe how not lean and
Mhm.
not healthy that I got over that 12-month period. But I was eating all these not burgers and all this fake meat and shit like that, and I thought I was doing good for myself. But it is sexy when you listen to the rhetoric of like this is for an environmental purpose, or this is for, it's better for your health and for longevity, and the blue zones, and there's just so much
Mhm.
information to kind of dissuade you from going down this path. But the point that I was trying to make is like, I've often heard you say, just test and measure like how you feel. It's like, do you want to lift heavy weights? Well, just see how the heavy weights feel and see how
Mhm.
your body responds to the heavy weights. Do you like cardio? Well, what kind of cardio? And so just see how your body responds to it. If you like this type of meat or that type of meat or this type of fruit, and if you want to add it back, if it does good, great, keep it. If it doesn't, that's your litmus test to kind of play around and manipulate everything to your own way of life and lifestyle. And if you've got young kids, it might be a little bit difficult, but you can manipulate this into your favor.
Yeah.
So that's what I like about it. You're not sort of
Yeah.
like it's hard and fast and that's it and don't do it. That's your lifestyle. You choose the way to do that. And if you want to come my way, grateful for doing that. But if you don't, well then there's variations.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I mean, I don't have any ideological sort of drives with this. I'm not like the Seventh Day Adventist where like this is enacted by God. You must stop eating. I don't care. I just want people to understand that that we have absolutely been lied to about the dangers of meat and animal fats. And that is completely false. This is one of the healthiest. This is the healthiest food and most bioavailable and nutritious foods that exists on planet Earth. That is just full stop. And plants do have toxins in there. I mean, it's so funny that I have to argue with people over second grade botany lessons. I mean, this is this is just this most simple, basic fact about the plant kingdom. And if you didn't learn that in school, you weren't paying attention. Like this is just a fact. And and just pointing this out that this is something you need to take seriously. And once people do it, like I don't care if people want to smoke or they want to drink or do drugs. I mean, I've been out with friends in college and things like that. They're doing coke and like it's not for me. I don't do that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I don't care if you want to do that. That's your business. When I had friends that sort of was getting a bit more, taking a bit more control of their life, obviously I would step in and talk to them like, hey, look, this is not something. This is not a road you want to go down, and try to help steer them back to normalcy. But you know, it's their life,
Yeah.
and I'm not their mom. And
That's right.
so, it's like I just want to make sure that people understand that meat isn't harmful for you and it's not harmful for the planet. And you actually kill less animals when you're eating meat than you do if you're doing going through plant agriculture, and you're not destroying the environment and all these chemicals and destroying the waterways and systems and birds and insects and all these sorts of things. Actually a huge impact on the globe when you're eating plants and growing all these plants. It's actually quite harmful.
Mm.
And so just to get that information out there, and then people do what the hell they want. Like I really don't care what people do. I want people to be healthy. I want them to be happy and thrive and enjoy their life. Like I actually do want that. I deeply want that. But whatever they want to do with their life, it's their life, and they have to live with those consequences. Like you can't have people that pay no consequence for being wrong making decisions. So I can't say, no, you have to do it my way, even if I think that's right, because what if it's not, and what if it goes wrong for them, it's not right for them? They're the ones who have to live with the consequences. So and the same thing is this: if they choose to be vegan, they want to do that, fine. It's better than a whole bunch of junk food garbage. Maybe they're junk food garbage vegan. That's got to be the worst of both worlds. But
Yeah.
it is their life, and they're the ones that have to deal with it. And so if I don't care. I mean, it's like the whole argument with like gay marriage. It's like, what do you care? It's like, it's not your house. You don't have to watch them. But
That's
it's
right.
like, and like,
You
and it's
agree?
just like, the gay marriage is like, oh, I don't want to get married. It's like, well, then don't go to the wedding, like whatever. Like it's not, it doesn't matter, it doesn't affect you.
Yes.
And their diet doesn't affect me, I don't care. Right.
Mm.
And that's important. I mean, I want people to understand this and have this information so that they can make an informed decision as an adult. But what they decide to do with that information is purely up to them. It really doesn't bother me at all if someone wants to go vegan after listening to everything I have to say. That's their choice. I just don't want people doing it because they think it's healthier for them, and that meat is evil and meat is harmful. Maybe they still think that, but at least they can have the opposing side of the argument. And that's what I'm trying to do. It's interesting, actually. because I made a sort of a snide comment about the blue zones when this professor from the University of Oxford recently published a paper saying that the benefits from these blue zones from the blue zone studies was basically just from shoddy data collection and statistics.
Hmm.
And so I sort of put that up on my story, and I tagged Dan Buettner, who did the blue zones and the blue zone studies, being like, "Oh, look at this," and so I made a little sort of a snide comment, and he actually responded. And he was saying, he was just like, "Hey, that's actually comes from this fraud of a PhD, and there's actually 15 peer-reviewed studies verifying what I'm doing." And I was just like, "Well, actually, I know researchers who have gone to the blue zones, that the same areas that you went to, and found that they were predominantly animal based and were not plant based whatsoever, like in Sardinia." And so no, I don't think they're the ones who are frauds. I think you're the fraud.
Oh, wow.
And he actually wrote me a long sort of letter after that, actually being quite nice, and I actually appreciate that, because I didn't start off by being nice to him, so you didn't have to be nice to me. But I've seen him make such disparaging remarks about people eating meat, and the benefits of eating plants and all these sorts of things. And then the Seventh Day Adventist Church did buy the rights to the blue zones, and they push this with an iron fist, trying to shove plant-based diets down people's throats. Oh yeah, live over 100, all that sort of stuff. And it's all about eat plants, eat plants, eat plants. And they talk about other things too, which I 100% agree with. The living in societies, having a good cultural, social network, and all these sorts of things, having exercise and walking and doing all these sorts of things. Totally agree with all that stuff.
Mhm.
But their emphasis on a plant-based diet is that bothers me, because it's very misleading. They don't, they're talking about, they don't talk about Hong Kong, and how it has like the most meat per meat consumption per capita in the world, and they also have the highest life expectancy in the world. Or the anti-blue zones, like India's entire subcontinent, with 1.4 billion people who were largely vegetarian and only eat about 3 kilos of meat per person per year. And they have the highest chronic disease rates on Earth, and a life expectancy of 66, is one of the lowest in the developed world, and well, in the world.
Glad to mention that.
And even on Dan Buettner's Instagram, one of his pinned posts is about Singapore. Oh yeah, Singapore is just launched up to be a new blue zone. But it has nothing to do with diet. It has to do with they incentivize eating good food. They decentivize and tax bad food, junk food. You're incentivized to walk and cycle. Cars are taxed heavily. They have good social family sort of things. This has been getting better and better and better over the years. But it's a bit disingenuous when he says, "Oh, it has nothing to do with diet; it has to do with all this other stuff." Okay, well, what is their diet? Well, in that same time period, in the last 25 years, when their life expectancy has gone up and up and up, they've eaten more and more meat, and now they're one of the highest consumers of meat per person in the world. So, why are you focusing on plant-based diets in some places when it suits you, and downplaying the amount of meat that places eat when it doesn't? I think that's completely dishonest.
Hmm.
And so I'm having a little back and forth with him now. So we'll see
Yeah,
how that
sounds
goes
like fun.
anyway. But no, I thought it was interesting anyway. But I was, oh, that was the other thing. He said, "Look, I'm not saying that the blue zones are plant-based. I never said they were. But push that they're very heavily plant-based. He said, look, I'm plant-based, but I don't say the blue zones are, because they're not. And that's not what I'm trying to put out there. And I'm not in the Seventh-Day Adventist Church. I'm like, look, I didn't say you were in the Seventh-Day Church. I had no idea. But I mean, they do own the blue zones now, and they're heavily backing this to push that. And people use the blue zones as evidence that that people should be eating a plant-based diet, and that's how you live over 100, because that's how it's being pitched.
Mm,
And so, if that wasn't your intention, then something's gone very wrong, and someone's really, really, co-opted your message, because that is what people think when they think blue zones.
true. Yeah. It makes sense until you go there. And I've been to a couple of blue zones, and it's
Mhm.
not how they eat. So,
No, it's not.
yeah. So, man, you've been so generous with your time. I really appreciate it. I think you're going to take the number one spot for the longest podcast I've ever done.
Oh
So
yeah.
yeah, you're
Yeah, nice.
exceeding in many ways, man.
Oh,
I
thanks, man.
appreciate you. I promise to put all the links to the plant-based MD,
Oh, thank you.
plant-free MD. So I shouldn't say that. Fuck
Plant-based
that up.
MD.
Try
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, that's another guy. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the other guy.
Yeah.
The plant-free MD and your website and all that kind of stuff, so people can sort of research your YouTube channel, all that kind of stuff. It's really valuable information, and you deliver it so well. And yeah, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you. You definitely give me a steer in a positive direction. I encourage anyone to just to dip their toe in the water and have a little look around the carnivore way. So I think it'd be good for them. Anyway, I appreciate you, brother. Thank you so much. I'll have this uploaded very soon and ready to go. So until we meet
Awesome.
again, I'll talk
Yeah.
to you soon. Okay.
Thanks a lot, man. Appreciate it. Good to see you again.
Likewise.